Chapter 300. Sia didn't hide her identity. It was easy to arouse suspicion if she did. She was frank and open. Those who knew her identity would naturally know, and those who shouldn't know would never know. The Quinn Group also donated funds to the cutting-edge technology laboratory. She acted neither servile nor overbearing and spoke very politely. "Dr. Wells, your place has really opened my eyes. I'm very honored to be able to study here." Her tone was mixed with a hint of arrogance, which was also what she meant. Young tycoons in Europe and America like Adam Knight Palmer were talented and devoted to learning, but most of them were ignorant and looked down on others. Oliver and Tommy were typical examples. The elegant Harrison Wells did not care about her arrogance at all. He smiled like a spring breeze and said, "I hope you didn't come in vain. Our laboratory is very good." After that, he shook hands with the two and ended the conversation. He had a lot of work to do. To some extent, Thea's real identity played a role in him being able to take time out to meet the two. After the person in charge of the laboratory met the two in person, they still had to work. Even if the president's daughter came, they could not afford to be idle. Caitlin Snow was assigned to the biology team. The team leader was an old virgin of African descent. When she saw their appearance, she snorted. Thea was dressed normally today, but it was hard for her appearance not to attract attention. Caitlin was a little dogmatic and strictly followed the workplace rules. When she arrived at the laboratory, she was still wearing a tight skirt and thin high heels. Plus, she looked very easy to bully. It was impossible for the old virgin to hit it off with her at first sight. "From today onwards, you'll be in charge of this place." The old virgin, who looked like Pigsy's second aunt, led the two to the northwest corner of the laboratory. She pointed to a row of bungalows and then walked away with her huge hips swaying. The two looked at each other. Caitlin was not a fool. If she did not feel anything when being targeted, there must be something wrong. However, she really did not know how she offended the old virgin. For a moment, she was a little confused and bit her lip. Thea did not care. In this society, people judged people by their appearance. Superficial people were everywhere. She could not be angry. "Let's go in and take a look." Thea was not afraid at all. Even if it was an alien teleportation portal, she could still fly back. She pulled Caitlin along and walked in. Those who did not know would think that she was a teacher and Caitlin was a student. As soon as they entered the room, the pungent smell almost made the two of them fall over. "Damn it!" Thea gritted her teeth and looked at the hundreds of cages in the room and the orangutans in the cages. The aura of anger and fear leaked out a little. The originally noisy gorillas miraculously quieted down, and a few of them even made the sound of teeth chattering. Let this old lady raise gorillas. Thea tried her best to calm her emotions. She was afraid that a red light ring would fly out from the depths of the universe. That would be interesting. In his heart, he tried his best to tell himself not to be angry. Being angry would hurt his liver and a bunch of other messy things. The last person who angered her to this extent was Senator Hammond from Seaside City. However, he was still a person in power. This old African virgin was nothing. Their original plan was to get the AI and run away. However, the first step had gone wrong. Their appearance had attracted hostility, and they were sent to a place that was so far away from the laboratory. Although this experience helped Caitlin gain a lot of sympathy from the male researchers, it did not help Thea at all. Seeing Caitlin's blank expression, Thea was used to giving orders. She did not wait for Caitlin to come back to her senses and shouted, "Is anyone here? Who's in charge here?" It was impossible for the two women to take care of hundreds of gorillas. There must be a professional keeper here. The two women's main job was to do biochemistry research, which was Caitlin's specialty. One in the east, two in the west. Soon, 7 people stood in front of Thea. "Just the few of you? My name is Thea Quinn. This is Dr. Caitlin Snow, who has just taken over this place. You can come to us if you need anything in the future. If there's nothing else, you can go about your business." Sia introduced herself casually. Let alone 7 people, even if there were 70,000 people, she wouldn't have any stage fright. Among the 7 people, there were 3 women and 4 men. They looked young and childish. The young man in the lead wanted to say that these gorillas were very irritable and should apply for some tranquilizers from the laboratory. However, when he was about to say it, he found that the place was quiet today. He hurriedly turned his head and found that all the gorillas were obediently waiting. Some of them were even lying face down on the ground. What the hell was this? It was so quiet. Did they need to apply for tranquilizers? He looked back at Thea, who was as beautiful as a peach. In order not to be treated as a fool, he swallowed his words. He put on what he thought was his most charming smile, and introduced the current situation of the management here to the two women. Thea had heard of it. She had always been thinking about the AI. It was none of her business whether these gorillas died or not. If she was annoyed, she would even lock reverse lightning up with the gorillas. Caitlin listened attentively. She asked questions from time to time and made special notes. The two women followed the young man inside. Thea took a banana from the table and threw it into the cage when she saw a gorilla that she liked. Although she had not specifically practiced darts, the basic skills were there for all to see. The banana drew a beautiful arc as it passed through the gaps of the iron cage. The young man watched as a banana hit the gorilla's head with a bang. In the past, the gorillas would have been furious, but today, they were all well behaved. Some of them even looked at Sia with a fawning expression after being hit. F***CK. The young man felt that this scene was a little different from his past experience of rearing gorillas. Were these gorillas all wretched? He had treated them so well that they would bare their fangs at him for no reason. Now, Thea was casually throwing bananas at the young gorillas, but none of them dared to fight back. The young man felt that he had found the trick to rearing gorillas. Thea did not know that her casual action had set a bad precedent for the young man who was determined to be the best breeder in the world. She casually walked past a row of young gorillas. With her powerful visual memory, she remembered the names of the gorillas even though she was not paying attention. Henry. Gertrude. Cohen. She took 2 steps forward and suddenly realized what she was looking at. She stopped in her tracks and walked back to the nameplate marked with Gertrude. She looked at the skinny and listless gorilla inside. Gertrude. Thea could not believe it. Gertrude was the nemesis of the Flash, a highly intelligent gorilla with telepathy and mind control. This guy's future achievements would surpass 90% of the Earth's villains. But was this really the gorilla she knew? Chapter 301. In the future, Jared was 5 meters tall and weighed several tons. It was impossible to say that he was weak. Thea only remembered that Jared gained the ability to control minds after he was secretly experimented on by the military and Reverse Lightning. Even Reverse Lightning used him as a trump card. Jared was cruel to all of his enemies. He was only slightly nicer to Caitlin. Was it because Caitlin was arranged to be here in the original time and space that they met? Thea probed with her psychic power and was a little disappointed. She could not find anything unusual about the little ape in front of her. Was it caused by anger? Thea threw another banana at the ape's face. The little ape rubbed its face and lay on the ground weakly, not daring to resist. Did she remember wrongly, or was it a mutation caused by the experiment? Or was it someone with the same name? There were too many possible reasons. Thea made a mental note of her doubts and planned to verify them in the future. When it was almost time to get off work, more than 10 researchers, both male and female, asked the 2 girls to have a meal. Thea was not interested at first, but Caitlin did not want to refuse such a welcome dinner. She almost begged Thea to go with Caitlin. Along the way, several male researchers with excessive hormone secretion tried to show off their talents, trying to attract their attention. Thea looked at a Latino man who did not speak much. His name was Cisco Ramon, a superhero codenamed Shockwave in the later stage. His ability was to open a passage between different dimensions and attack enemies with powerful vibration waves in battle. Of course, he did not have any superpowers now, just like Caitlin Snow. However, his value, even in the later stage, was not reflected in his fighting ability, but in his mind and wisdom. Many of the technological weapons he invented were not inferior to Batman's. Even the original version of Captain Frigid's freeze gun that Thea obtained from the future was his work. Thea picked out a few questions about the freeze gun and chatted with him, but soon Thea could not continue. Cisco Ramon was staring at her face and did not listen to her at all. Ah, you're talking about the pressure reducer, right? I think we can do it this way. Someone beside him nudged him, and only then did Psyker Ramon snap out of his daze. It had to be said that this person was really smart. He actually remembered Thea's problem even though he was in a daze, and racked his brains to think of a solution for her. This frost gun was designed by him in the future. Naturally, it was very compatible with the knowledge he had learned. Captain Langhan's IQ and EQ were very high, but he only graduated from high school. There were very few places that could be modified. Cisco Ramon only felt that the questions this unbelievably beautiful woman had asked him were all questions he was best at. At first, he was still a little nervous, but when it came to topics he was good at, he did not have to use too much of his brain. From the beginning, he could draw inferences about other things from one example to the next. Even though he did not really understand what Thea was asking him, he still broke it down and explained it to her. Cisco Ramon did not have a doctorate. In addition to his ordinary appearance, he kept a low profile among a group of academic giants. Later on, he and Caitlin Snow became important members of the Flash team. Even Reverse Lightning praised Cisco Ramon as his son. This was not about his looks, but Cisco's intelligence and wisdom had moved Reverse Lightning, who had transmigrated from the 25th century. The relationship between Cisco Ramon and Reverse Lightning was a little like the relationship between Malcolm and Oliver in Star City. They had mutual recognition and admiration for each other, but because they were in different positions, they had to kill each other. Could it be that this beautiful woman has taken a liking to me? Seeing that Thea was listening attentively, Cisco Ramon could not help but think. For a moment, he felt so happy that he could fly. He explained everything he knew, whether it was related or not. Thea felt that she had learned a lot. After all, Captain Lang Han was the original creator of the frost gun. He was able to analyze the principles behind many things that Captain Lang Han did not know. She believed that as long as Thea summed it up, she would be able to create the frost gun when she returned. When you heat the aziridine to 100 degrees Celsius, and at the same time add the ring 3 structured polymers. Can you do this? After asking about the frost gun, Thea began to ask about the atomic suit. To some extent, these questions had already surpassed Cisco Ramon's knowledge. The atomic suit's technology, which even Reverse Lightning admired, was not something that Cisco, who was still a rookie, could explain. However, Cisco Ramon was also a genius. He was able to use his existing knowledge to explain many of the atomic suit's technical principles. Although it was not the correct direction, it was still an eye-opener for Thea. As Thea continued to throw out profound questions, Cisco Ramon's wild imagination was suppressed by the spirit of science. He regained the seriousness of a scientist and began to discuss with Thea in detail. At first, the people in the advanced research lab were just there to watch the show. However, as the content of the discussion became deeper and deeper, the few people who thought that they were scientists also joined in. This made Ronnie Raymond, who had been preparing for dinner all afternoon, feel a little depressed. Shouldn't they be talking about fashionable men and women? You guys are here to cause trouble by discussing all kinds of chemical reactions in the bar. More importantly, he had seen Thea's picture before. When he saw the people around Thea fawning over her, he could not help but sneer. These idiots don't know anything. The chairman of the Quinn Corporation is worth billions. Why would she be interested in ordinary people like you? Ronnie Raymond's family background could barely be considered top-notch. He had access to a lot of rumors, both true and false. The most popular rumor in the small circle was that this Thea had bewitched Bruce Wayne of the Wayne Corporation. The two of them were working together to build some kind of temple. Many people overinterpreted the rumor and thought that the temple was fake. Why would they need to test the reaction of the higher-ups? It was an obvious thing. The Wayne Corporation and the Quinn Corporation were going to form a marriage alliance. The alliance of the two giant corporations would attract the interests of all parties. Therefore, they made up a story about building a temple to test the reaction of the higher-ups. Competing with the playboy Bruce Wayne? Ronnie Raymond had never thought that it would be so challenging. Thea was not on his list of targets. His target was Caitlin Snow. The two of them had similar family backgrounds and were about the same age. Most importantly, Caitlin Snow looked weak and easy to bully. She was the most suitable candidate for him. Thea went on dates with Diana on weekends. In her free time, she studied magic and the new armor. She did not care about the gossip at all. Batman thought that this kind of thing was not worth mentioning and did not take it seriously at all. Therefore, the rumor had been spreading in a small circle and did not cause a big stir at all. Some people even thought that they had inside information and wantonly stocked up on the stocks of the two companies. Of course, this was a story for later. Chapter 302. Cisco Ramon didn't know the secrets of the so-called upper class. He only knew that a beautiful girl was listening to him attentively. Although he was born a commoner and looked ordinary, his heart was about to jump out of his chest. He didn't think too much about Thea's ridiculous questions. He only hated himself for not reading more books and learning more knowledge. Thea nodded silently. After Cisco explained with all the knowledge he had learned in his life, and with her efforts during this period of time, she finally understood about 50% to 50% of the Atom Man's suit, but this was the limit for now. The current Cisco Ramon was still a far cry from the Atom Man in his prime. Plus, the two had different research directions. To be able to explain to this extent was already a testament to his research ability. Unfortunately, this guy was going to be a celebrity in the future. Knowing his achievements, Reverse Lightning would never let him go. Otherwise, he would definitely be a good helper in the Quinn group. The gathering didn't last long and soon dispersed. After all, there was a lot of work in the laboratory, and it was enough for them to get to know each other. Cisco Ramon didn't call for a cab. His left and right legs were trembling as he walked back to his apartment. He rubbed his face hard. He couldn't remember what he had said the entire night. All he remembered was that he had discussed applied science with a beautiful woman for half a day. Hating his lack of knowledge, he took out 2 books and prepared to read more. Unfortunately, after 10 minutes of reading, he didn't understand a single word. He took out his computer and prepared to search for Thea's information in case he needed it. He could become good friends with Felicity in the future, and his computer skills were also good, but the information he found still made his heart sink. His mother was the mayor, and he was the chairman of a listed company. He could find a recent photo of Thea and the new mayor of Seaside City at a press conference at the site of the city reconstruction. In the photo, Thea was dressed more maturely than she was tonight, but there was no mistaking her appearance. It was the same person. Sigh. Cisco Ramon threw himself on the sofa. No matter how talented he was, he knew that the gap between the two was boundless. They were not people from the same world at all. His budding good feelings were splashed with sulfuric acid by the cruel reality. This was the true portrayal of his heart. Although he knew it was impossible, he still secretly observed Thea for 2 days. One weekend, he accidentally saw Thea kissing a classic beauty with long legs. Only then did he completely give up on this muddle-headed relationship. That woman was also breathtakingly beautiful. Psyker couldn't tell which of the 2 women was prettier, but he knew that he had no chance. Cisco Ramon walked back to the laboratory alone, still feeling gloomy about the scene he had seen. Damn it, 2 such beautiful women together. What a waste of resources. Since such a beautiful and rich woman was working hard to study, then a poor person like him who could not be seen in a crowd could not slack off. Psyker Ramon turned his grief into strength as he put away his frivolous personality and began a new round of learning. Thea didn't know that her unintentional actions had caused some misunderstandings. In fact, even if she knew, she wouldn't care. Every weekend, she would go out to play with Diana and travel all over the Earth and the Milky Way. The situation in the cutting-edge technology laboratory was still not optimistic. Thea collected Reverse Lightning's fingerprints and found the secret door where the artificial intelligence was hidden. However, there were too many people in the laboratory. According to her observation, even Reverse Lightning couldn't find a chance to enter the secret door, let alone herself. The opportunity had to wait. Thea stayed in the laboratory for 2 days a week, learning from Caitlin and discussing the latest research results with Cisco Ramon. When she was free, she would throw bananas at Gruder for fun. When Gruder saw her enter the door, he had a conditioned reflex of covering his head. Was this guy really the big villain or not? This thought came to Thea's mind several times because no matter how she looked at this little ape, there was nothing special about it. Its body was thin and small, and its personality was weak. Even among primates, this ape's intelligence was considered slow, let alone telepathy. Looking around, Thea made sure that no one was paying attention to her. She stretched out her psychic feelers, ready to see if this ape was the one she remembered. Out of caution, she only used 30% of her strength. However, Thea underestimated her current strength. As soon as her psychic feelers entered the ape's brain, she heard a plop sound. The little ape, Gruder, fainted straight away. Thea was a little embarrassed. Recently, she had been practicing with Diana more and more frequently. Although her psychic feelers only increased a little each time, with the help of the divine power, her psychic feelers were far stronger than usual. Seeing Gruder fainted so quickly, Thea knew that she had used too much strength. When she muttered in her heart that she should have used 10% of her strength, Gruder woke up again in a daze. Although the little ape's eyes were still blank, Thea's psychic feelers found that there was something different about it. This ape was stimulated by her to the point that it had a little bit of intelligence. It was not a psychic attack, and it did not even have basic logical thinking. However, this ape had surpassed its peers in terms of intelligence. What the hell is going on? Sia couldn't believe her memory. She was the one who saved the dead man. Could it be that Gruder's telepathic ability was also accidentally created by her? She thought of the sentence that Gruder always said, "Gruder doesn't like bananas." If this had nothing to do with Thea throwing bananas at him every day, Thea would not believe it. Cause, result, past and future? All kinds of thoughts kept colliding, and for a moment, it was a little creepy. Did she get the memories and change their fates, or did she change their fates in the first place? Thea did not know. She could only continue to pay attention to the follow-up development. Although it was a little hard to believe, Thea still found that Gruder was becoming more and more different from his peers. The confusion in his eyes was gradually dissipating, and his body was getting stronger. When the keepers fed him, he could use some simple pleasing expressions and body movements to get more food. All signs indicated that this ape was on the path of rapid evolution. Thea observed for 2 more days and decided not to wait any longer. She was 70% sure that this ape was Gruder, the one who had beaten the Flash. Those who are not of my kind must have a different heart. This was the true portrayal of Gruder's life. He had always thought that he was better than human beings, and his life's goal was to destroy human beings more efficiently. Gruder was completely different from the dead. Although the dead were jerks, they were essentially good people. Chapter 303. If Thea was a true hero from Earth, he would have killed her without hesitation. Unfortunately, she was not. If she was not an Earthling, then what about all the aliens in the universe? Although Groot was a freak in the eyes of the people on Earth, there were countless creatures that were even weirder than him in the universe. They couldn't just kill all of them in the name of justice. Thea wanted to imprint her own mark on Gertrude's mind before he grew up. The mark would grow stronger as Gertrude grew, but at the same time, it would also give him power. This power was none other than the hinting technique that Thea used to deal with the leaders of the Owl Court in Gotham. As Gertrude's mental power broke through the threshold of his species, he would usher in an unprecedented period of growth. At that time, the hinting technique that was imbued with Thea's mental power would be completely integrated with Gertrude. If nothing went wrong, it would become a powerful skill that would become famous in the future: mind control. It's hard to imagine. I really created this guy. Thea muttered to herself. Everything was so strange. It was her secret intervention that created the gorilla that would shake the entire central city in the future. Gertrude was not a mutation caused by the military's experiments. It was understandable that the military had done thousands of experiments, but why was Gertrude the only one that stood out? It was because there was a mastermind behind it, and the military was just a scapegoat. Without any self-awareness of being the mastermind behind it, Thea's psychic implantation was unusually smooth. Gertrude's resistance was weak and almost non-existent. Her psychic implantation was like a fierce robber. She kicked the door open and moved into the best house. No matter how much the robber yelled, he would not make a sound. Thea did not stay in Central City for long. She hurried back to Star City because Malcolm had returned from his trip around the world. Malcolm, who had been working hard, did not look as gloomy as before. His originally white skin had a tendency to develop in the direction of tanning. I've gained a lot. I've found an important clue about the Merlin family. This was the first sentence that Malcolm said when they met. Now, that necklace was nothing to Thea. She had already completed her foundation. The first half of the necklace was a wind elemental acceleration spell, while the second half was a water elemental healing spell. With Thea's current attainments in magic, she could easily cast it. However, seeing how serious Malcolm was about this matter, she did not say much. You seem to have a lot of connections with the military now. Malcolm asked worriedly. Cooperation with the military is inescapable for the development of the Quinn Group. On the other hand, it can also deepen my mother's foundation in the political world. They complement each other. Thea answered with certainty. The United States was a global hegemon, and its military was far more powerful than what the media had reported. Although she knew that there would be a lot of trouble, this was the price to pay for climbing to the top. Malcolm stared into her eyes for a long time before nodding. All right, I trust your judgment. He then took out a stack of documents and handed them to Thea. What is this? Thea flipped through the documents. The shares of the Merlin Group. You want it? Yes, your achievements far exceed mine. The Merlin Group is just a past for me. It's also a burden for Tommy. Although I don't know what your plan is, it'll increase your weight in the military. Malcolm's face was solemn when he said this, but his words were full of love. Even though Thea did not show her feelings easily, her eyes were still a little red. She did not know whether she should accept this gift or not. Take it. I'll stay in England for the next few years and continue to investigate. Tommy. I think he's doing well in Gotham. I still have a lot of property that he inherited. It should be enough for his daily expenses. My daughter, you are my pride. You are a gift from the gods. There's not much I can do for you, but you must accept it. Don't expose our relationship. You know how much Tommy loves his mother. If he knows the truth, our relationship as father and son will be over. You must keep it a secret. Thea's nose twitched. The father-son relationship was just an excuse. Malcolm was afraid that her identity as an illegitimate daughter would be a stain on his reputation. He used a casual tone to cover up their relationship. Daddy. Thea could no longer control her emotions. Even though she felt sorry for old Robert, she was still touched by Malcolm's fatherly love. All right. You're so busy. Take the documents away. We'll hold a press conference in a few days. Malcolm shoved the documents into her hands and pushed her out of the room. Thea smiled. The old man was not good at expressing his feelings. His eyes were red around the rims, even though he was speaking harshly. Thea went through the documents when she returned to her residence. They were notarized documents for the gift of shares. She just had to sign it and it would take effect immediately. Thea kept the documents after reading them. She was not in a hurry. She took out the few drops of God's blood that she had collected after the battle with Horus. There were 6 drops in total. 4 of them were ordinary drops and the other 2 had higher energy content. 1 drop of the ordinary God's blood was used to save the Atom Hero. Thea absorbed another drop on Paradise Island. She also absorbed a drop of the higher energy content later. There are only 3 drops left. How do I split them? Thea rubbed her chin and pondered. She had originally planned to give one to each of her parents and the rest to herself. However, the God's blood was no longer of much help to her body. Even if she sparred with Diana a few more times, the effects would be better than the God's blood. She decided to leave 1 drop for Tommy. Although he did not know about their relationship, he had given up the Merlin Group. No matter how she looked at it, she should compensate him. However, the drop of high-energy God's blood gave Thea a hard time. The energy was too high for ordinary people to absorb. No matter who she gave it to, they would die. Thea could only continue to flip through the magic books and consult Psyker in Central City. Finally, she came up with a way to combine magic and technology. Whether it was Malcolm or Moira, their bodies had already entered a period of decline. Even absorbing ordinary God's blood was a very troublesome matter. Psyker did not know what she was going to do, but he still came up with a good idea. A drop of God's blood would be divided into 12 portions and injected intravenously every month. After a year, 70 to 80% of the God's blood could be absorbed. As for the drop of God's blood with higher energy content, Thea divided it into 24 portions. She gave half to Tommy and the other half to Oliver. 2 young people who practiced martial arts would not explode if they absorbed a drop of high-energy God's blood together. What's this? Malcolm was curious about why Thea had not announced the news. Anyway, he had finished the handover with several CEOs and subordinates. At this time, he was packing up and preparing to leave for England to continue to pursue clues about the descendants of the Merlin family. Thea came to him and asked him to dismiss the servants. She handed him a silver-white suitcase. Chapter 304. Although he didn't see where Thea took the suitcase from, he still opened it and stared at the syringe in a daze. Spiral structure, blue liquid, and a silver-white suitcase. Are you sure this isn't the T-virus from Resident Evil? What's this? Malcolm wanted to know the answer even though he had a few guesses. It's the blood of a fallen god. I divided the original drop into 12 portions. You can absorb 1 portion every month. It will strengthen your body and prolong your life. Don't you need it yourself? Of course, Thea couldn't tell her father that she had sex with a long-legged beauty every week. The cumulative effect of 2 or 3 sessions was no worse than directly absorbing the blood. She didn't answer directly. 1 for you, 1 for Mother, and 1 for Tommy. I'm not sure if he'll get superpowers, but his body will definitely recover to its peak. Malcolm rolled his eyes and patted Thea's shoulder. You're so considerate. He put away the suitcase. I'm leaving. You can give Tommy his portion. Malcolm didn't inject him directly because he knew his son too well. Unless he knocked him out and injected him directly, he would definitely give him to Laurel after explaining the use of the blood. When the time came, he would leave his share to Malcolm. Malcolm felt that as a middle-aged man, it did not matter whether he lived a few more years or not. His goal was to make his children healthier. Thea didn't think there was any problem. After sending old Ma off, she took the signed documents and rushed to the Merlin Group with a bunch of lawyers and accountants. Malcolm was very free and easy to let go of the Merlin Group. Of course, he couldn't tell others that he was an illegitimate daughter. The father and daughter had a unified statement that Thea had bought his shares. Several of his trusted subordinates knew the result in advance, but they didn't know the reason. In order to prevent them from hindering Thea from taking over the group, Malcolm withdrew all his subordinates. Now, only a few executives were left in the Merlin Group. What? Merge with the Quinn Group? The president of the Merlin Group submitted his resignation to the board of directors 3 days ago. Now, the person in charge of the daily affairs was the original vice president, a high-ranking employee. He had thought that Thea had come personally to discuss some cooperation, but he had guessed correctly. The union was indeed a union, but the creation was nowhere to be seen. The vice president was sweating profusely and urgently summoned the legal department to verify the authenticity of the document. The results showed that the documents were authentic and valid. Whether it was the signatures, seals, or notarization, they were all in accordance with the provisions of the law. The vice president felt like he was on fire and urgently asked the remaining directors. Although they didn't agree unanimously, Thea had more than half of the shares. In other words, as long as Thea wanted to, she could complete the merger of the two companies. Thea was here today to do this. Otherwise, why would she bring so many lawyers and accountants with her? Was she here for a vacation? Merge, start the process of merging now. Immediately. Immediately. The vice president worked for a salary, so he couldn't find any reason to object. According to Thea's order, he informed the administrative departments one by one to complete the handover of the work and wait for further orders. Of course, the merger of the two companies wouldn't be so simple. Thea just stopped Merlin's business first to ensure that there wouldn't be a large outflow of funds. She still had to negotiate with a lot of directors. Yes, a lot of directors. Originally, the directors of Quinn and Merlin might have to withdraw from the board of directors because of the merger and the dilution of the shares. However, Thea had to appease these people. There were also many people who held shares of the two companies at the same time and joined the board of directors because of the merger. For example, Felicity, the vice president of Quinn, now looked at Bruce Wayne as if she had seen a monster. Bruce Wayne personally held scattered shares of most of the companies in the world. This time, the merger of Quinn and Merlin had actually reached the point where he could join the board of directors. When he received Thea's call, he had to come, whether it was for business or personal reasons. Batman gave Felicity a subtle look, telling her not to say anything, and walked into the conference room calmly. Welcome, Bruce. Thea was at the door of the conference room, welcoming all the directors who came to the meeting. The two of them were very close in private. Batman had already written 2 pages of entries about Thea in his little black notebook. However, on the surface, they knew each other because of the temple incident. Thea welcomed him indifferently. Bruce Wayne showed his playboy attitude in front of others and chatted with Thea for a while. Welcome, Mr. Luthor. Not long after Bruce entered, a young man with long hair came to the door. The man's eyes were very bright, showing extraordinary wisdom. Thea glanced at the top of his head without batting an eyelid. This person has good hair. Why would he become bald in the future? Miss Quinn, you've done a lot. You've completed the merger quietly. It seems like I won't be able to keep my title of business tycoon for long. Oh, let me introduce you. This is my sister, Lena Luthor. She will hold the shares of the new group for me in the future. Lex Luthor didn't know why Thea was looking at his head, but he didn't care. He mocked Thea a little, then introduced his sister and hid behind the scenes. He also clearly expressed his support for the merger. His superb conversational skills not only expressed his intention but also didn't embarrass others. They were indeed the 3 popular villains. The wise Lex Luthor, the crazy Joker, and the tenacious Sinisto. The 3 of them were full of strong personal style. Thea had always been looking forward to this Superman's nemesis, but they were in different camps. She didn't say much and just greeted the timid little girl behind Luther who pretended to be calm. "Welcome too, Miss Luther. I believe that we'll have a good time working together in the future." The little girl nodded slightly and walked in with Lex Luthor politely. At the appointed time, Thea looked at her watch and knew that all the directors had basically arrived. The remaining few who were dissatisfied with the merger didn't need to pay attention to him and officially began the merger discussion. After the merger of the two groups, Thea personally held 31% of the shares of the new group, and no one else held more than 10%. The directors of the Quinn Group had been brainwashed and replaced by her in the past 2 years, and they were very obedient. Several of the Merlin Group's shareholders had received Malcolm's signal and didn't dare to disobey. The remaining shareholders who were controlled by the government and the military expressed their support. The scattered shareholders represented by Bruce Wayne and Lex Luthor also didn't raise any objections. A giant multinational business group with a market value equal to that of the Wayne Group and the Luthor Group was born in this conference room. The group was named Quinn Merlin Group, in honor of its predecessors. In the next few days, Thea was very busy. The same departments were merged, and different departments were expanded or abolished according to the situation. All kinds of directors were busy expressing their loyalty and talking about their ideals. They blocked Thea for 3 days, making Diana think that she was besieged and almost pulled out her sword to save her. Chapter 305. How annoying! Thea sent away another middle-aged man with an extraordinary aura. She threw away her pen and stood by the window, looking into the distance. The middle-aged man who spoke to her before was just a small shareholder. Logically speaking, Thea would not have the right to meet him personally. However, although this person's status was low, he had many people behind him. Yes, his words and actions represented the United States government and those who controlled the country's lifeline behind the scenes. It was not some ridiculous matter of annexation of industries or opposition to the merger, but a problem that neither Thea nor Malcolm had realized. The merger of Quinn and Merlin had resulted in the new group's business covering military research and development, new energy mining, urban construction, shipping, and many other fields. The group had nearly 100,000 employees. Perhaps this was not enough to attract the government's attention. What was worse was that Moira was the mayor of Star City, and Thea was wantonly merging the groups under her rule. After the merger, the new group would be the largest in Star City. With Moira's help and the collusion between the government and the businessmen, were the mother and daughter planning to change the name of Star City to Quinn City? In the free and democratic United States of America, there must be no news that could be attacked by an indescribable country. The middle-aged man who had just walked out of Thea's office was only there to test the waters. He had been talking for a long time just to send a message. Could the group's headquarters be moved appropriately? As for where to? The higher-ups felt that the 2 international metropolises in United States of America were more suitable for the new group's positioning. Thea politely sent the middle-aged man away. She was now a big shot who could shake the ground with a stomp of her feet. It was impossible for her to agree to a small fries request immediately. There were a lot of problems involved. Looking through the floor-to-ceiling window at the construction workers in the distance, Thea let out a sigh of relief. Damn it, what kind of international metropolis is this? Isn't it just Gotham and the metropolis? These 2 places. From a business perspective, the metropolis was definitely beneficial for the group's development, but Thea really did not want to go. How free was she to go to the metropolis and Gotham to make money? However, it was indeed inappropriate not to move. At least it would affect Moira's career. This was something Thea did not want to see. Which was more important, the value of her mother's life or the safety of the group's employees? Thea didn't even think about it and automatically chose the former. From her point of view, Metropolis and Gotham were definitely in danger, but with her current strength, the danger was not great. The speed of the yellow light ring was the fastest among all the lights. If even Thea could not escape, then there were not many who could. He told his assistant to check if the corporation had any land in the metropolis or Gotham. The new headquarters had to be built tall and big. Once the news spread, the government would know what he meant. They would also take care of him within the rules. Fortunately, the relocation of the headquarters could be delayed for a long time. In the short term, Star City was still Thea's headquarters. However, there was only one headquarters. Should he choose Metropolis or Gotham? Although Gotham was very familiar, Thea did not like the weather there. Although they did not stop the rain, The clouds accumulated too quickly. If they relaxed for a few days, the sky would be filled with dark clouds again. Although Thea could absorb sunlight and moonlight, she could not absorb sunlight that was blocked. If she stayed in Gotham for a long time, her speed of strengthening would be much slower. On the other hand, the Court of Owls was involved in all aspects of Gotham. Logically speaking, if she brought a large corporation there, it would definitely cause conflict. If the conflict was small, it would be easy to expose the fact that she secretly controlled the court. If the conflict was big, it would be too troublesome to fight with her own people. After considering all the factors, Thea gave up on Gotham and prepared to move to Metropolis. The government was very happy to hear that she was going to move to Metropolis. They did not know about Thea's concerns. From their point of view, they also hoped that Thea would go to Metropolis. Gotham was chaotic and disorderly. Wayne Enterprises was controlled layer by layer. The government was not afraid of Bruce Wayne doing anything big. On the contrary, the extremely egotistical Lex Luthor was a headache for them. The Luthor Corporation was impenetrable under his management. Lex's parents had deep connections in Shangzheng, so they could not touch him. Lex Luthor had a genius mind, an arrogant personality, and huge financial resources. How could he not arouse fear? How could that be? Hearing that Thea was going to Metropolis, a few of the higher-ups were very happy. They instructed their subordinates to handle the merger of her new corporation as soon as possible. The government gave the green light. The work that would have taken at least 3 months was completed in a little more than a month. The Quinn Merlin Corporation's big name officially appeared on the stock exchange. Although the shareholders did not understand how these two corporations, whose businesses were not related at all, could be combined, a large number of people still eagerly threw money into the Quinn Merlin Corporation when they saw the corporation's new shares soar. Because of the government's influence, either overt or covert, Thea's personal value reached an all-time high. It even approached Bruce Wayne for a while. Many calm shareholders quickly figured out that something was wrong and sold a portion of their shares. However, Thea, who had invested a lot of money beforehand, still made hundreds of millions of dollars by buying low and selling high. If this large sum of money was placed in an indescribable country, it would definitely be invested in real estate. However, Thea took out a map and looked around, trying to find a city without a superhero. Unfortunately, she could not find it. If she bought a house in this world, she would just be waiting to be flattened by bad aliens. After pocketing the money, just as Thea thought that her days would continue like this, Amanda Waller of the Heaven's Eye Society personally came to visit. After getting in touch with the military, Thea was no longer as anxious about the Heaven's Eye Society as before. She knew that she was up to no good, but she could not kick her out. "Sister Amanda, you're looking for me? You see, I'm very busy now." Thea pointed at the documents on her desk. The new corporation had more than 10 presidents and vice presidents, but in the early stages of the merger, there were many things that she needed to make decisions on. These people could not help her. She did not even have time to go on a date with Diana last week. Instead, she called Diana to her office and closed the door to read the documents for the whole day. "There is something that I need your help with." Amanda lowered her attitude. She was no longer the kind of person who would come and go as she pleased. Thea was not someone who did not know what was good for her. Since she had received respect, she put down her pen and waited for her to continue. "I have a doctor named Joan Munn in archaeology. She's very capable. A month ago, she accidentally fell into an ancient cave while she was on an expedition in Peru. After we rescued her, several medical experts couldn't do anything about her condition. Her consciousness seems to be a little confused. I heard that you have some healing abilities? Can you help me take a look?" Chapter 306. Thea thought for a while. She had never heard of this name before. It was most likely a mental patient, so she did not pay much attention to it. She nodded and told them to contact her whenever they had time. 3 nights later, Thea arrived at the meeting place on time. Laura Michaels was the one who greeted her. Thea thought that Amanda had gone to Hong Kong to train Olivier again. "I haven't thanked you for saving me last time." The mature girl, Laura, greeted her with a smile. The 2 agents who had entered the base with them in Seaside City had died on the spot. The only reason Laura was still alive was because Sia had helped her out for the sake of an acquaintance. Thea immediately said that it was not worth mentioning. After all, it was a piece of cake for her. If she was stronger, the other 2 agents would not have left her in the lurch. The two walked into the hospital that belonged to the Heaven's Eye Society. Patients of all shapes and sizes walked past them from time to time. Some thought that they could fly, some thought that they were rocks and wanted to bang their heads against the wall. It was as if they had returned to Arkham. After passing through a few checkpoints and entering the underground facility, Thea saw the patient who needed her treatment. You think this person is mentally ill? The woman in front of her was petite. Her skin was pale, and her blood was bluish-purple. The woman was tied to the bed with a rope. Her body was twisted from time to time. Her eyes were rolled back, and white foam was coming out of her mouth. She looked like she was mentally ill. However, looking at her pale face and the sharp nails on her hands, she seemed to be cursed. Sister Lara, why does this patient have such long nails? Don't you cut them for her? Thea asked as she pointed at the woman's fingers that looked like chicken feet. Lara had been running around the world. It was her first time seeing this patient. She felt embarrassed and immediately asked the person in charge. The Heaven's Eye Society paid them so much, but this patient's nails were almost longer than her fingers. Was this how they lived? I'm innocent. Miss Lara, we hold her down and cut her nails every day, but she grows really fast. We can't do anything about it. If you don't believe us, we have video evidence. The person in charge was a fat woman who weighed more than 100 pounds. When she heard Lara's question, she kept saying that she was innocent. She swore to the heavens that she did not do anything wrong. It was the patient who grew fast. How can it grow so long if you cut it every day? Thea didn't say anything. Lara stared at the fat woman with an unfriendly expression. This woman seemed to have eaten a lot, and her face was oily. Where did the money come from? It must have been secretly embezzled. The fat woman's expression was very vivid, as if she had been greatly wronged. She patted her chest loudly and insisted that she had been cutting it every day recently. Lara laughed coldly. You've been cutting it every day recently because we gave you 3 days' notice. In order not to make a fool of herself in front of Thea, an outsider, Lila suppressed the anger in her heart and prepared to teach her a lesson later. Thea didn't care how much money they were greedy for. She just wanted to finish the mission as soon as possible. Do you have the patient's brain scan report? The fat woman stammered and couldn't say anything. Lila was completely furious. Are you kidding me? It's such a reasonable request, and you can't even afford to take a look at the film? Did you not take a picture at all? You reported that this woman was crazy, but you didn't treat her at all. Let me explain. The fat woman saw that Lila was about to explode. She immediately took out a stack of films from another drawer with a movement that didn't match her body shape. There seems to be a shadow in this patient's brain. Our detection equipment can't distinguish it at all. Lila pulled it over and took a closer look. The fat woman wasn't lying. Whether it was the angiogram or the CT scan of the head, they all showed an ink-like black shadow. Thea, take a look. Lila flipped through the films and handed them to Thea. Thea flipped through them and thought to herself. If the fat woman didn't sell the new equipment and bought an old one from an Indian hospital to make up the numbers, these images showed that there was something wrong with this woman. Even if the clown woman was crazy, she could still scan the brain's brain. This black shadow, was she still human? Since science couldn't be relied on, magic could only solve the problem. Although Thea consciously avoided using magic in her daily life, she still had to use it when necessary. She opened the Eye of Horus and scanned the patient's brain. The moment her eyes made contact with the black shadow, a large number of scattered memories followed her line of sight and entered Thea's mind. Sacrifices, blood, a large number of villagers who died of illness, mountains in the distance, and chaotic fragments of memory attacked Thea and made her take a step back. What is this? As if some kind of signal had been activated, Thea's spying ability of the Eye of Horus triggered the dissatisfaction of the monster in the woman's body. A mist of magic quickly spread around. Lila, who was still alert, immediately took out her pistol and asked in a stern voice. The fat woman was a little slower than her. Ghost. The fat woman screamed and hid under the bed in fear. Unfortunately, she usually ate too well, so her whole body was short and round. Her head and upper body could barely fit in, but her huge butt was still exposed, making people have the urge to kick it. As the monster's magic spread, the lights in the entire underground area went out. Several armed guards outside the door quickly rushed in. As for whether they were here to protect Lila or the fat woman, no one knew. Charming witch? What kind of name is this? It took Thea some time to process these memories. She was very experienced in brainwashing people. She discarded the meaningless trifles and tried to find the memories of the time, places, and people. After that, she sorted out the whole life track of the victim. The result made her speechless. This woman turned out to be a pure magic user. And if she remembered correctly, this woman was the boss of the movie, Suicide Squad. This woman was the only magic user that Thea had dealt with in a long time. Thea did not dare to act rashly. From the memory, she judged that the woman had lived for hundreds of years. In theory, she had a lot more magic power than herself, but she did not seem to be very good at it. At this time, the charming witch was wearing a crescent moon headdress. Her whole body was as black as ink, and her messy hair was scattered over her shoulders. She curled up in the corner of the room and looked at Thea with dull eyes. She knew that she had suffered. Joan Munn had interrupted her sleep. Joan Munn was just an ordinary person, and she did not have any magic power at all. Both of them were in pain when she possessed her. Now that she was stimulated by Thea's Eye of Horus, she was not prepared at all and appeared in front of others. The plan had not yet begun, but it seemed that there was a possibility that it would go wrong. Thea was afraid of her strong magic power, and the charming witch's body was stiff, so her magic power was not working well. The two of them were in a stalemate, and neither of them dared to make the first move. Chapter 307. What is this? Lara's hands trembled uncontrollably as she held the gun. Although the room was dimly lit, she could still see the charm witch's green eyes. This is the monster that possessed your female doctor. Perhaps she was once a human. If I'm not mistaken, she should have used West African voodoo techniques to make herself neither human nor ghost. For centuries, she has been calling herself the Enchanted Witch. There were too many people in the room, so it was not convenient for Thea to transform her light ring. She took out her divine longbow and knocked a lightning arrow to guard against any possible attacks. Lara gestured to the few guards behind her, asking them to leave first. The house was too small, and the group of people who rushed in seemed to be very loyal, but they were all fat and strong, blocking the door tightly. Lara did not need their loyalty now, she just wanted to get out quickly. She whispered to Thea, "Can you deal with this black thing? More or less. You should leave first." Thea observed for a while and found the problem with Lara's body. She was definitely stronger than Thea in terms of magic power, but her body was stiff, and she did not know how much power she could use. If Lara was invincible, why would she be so cautious in the corner? Lara did not need her to tell her. She wanted to go out long ago. However, she could not go out with a few idiots blocking the door. She gestured for a long time before she remembered that it was pitch black, and these people could not see at all. She was also afraid that she would expose her position and attract the attention of the thing. She was very annoyed. Lara did not go out, but raised her gun to guard. Thea was fully focused on the charm witch and did not know the truth behind it. She was quite touched. This big sister looked cold, but she was actually very warm inside. Can you understand me? Thea could not stay in this stalemate, so she had to break the silence. Unfortunately, she tried several languages, but the other party was indifferent. She just curled up in the corner and looked at them silently. You don't have a vocal organ? You still don't understand? Can you go back to that body and communicate with us? Thea suggested as she pointed at Jean Munn, who was no longer struggling on the bed. However, the man continued to ignore her. As Thea spoke more and more, the man glared at Thea fiercely like a wolf. They were both magic users, so it wasn't hard to guess what the other party was thinking. What? You've taken a fancy to my body. You want to absorb my magic to rejuvenate yourself, don't you? Stupid. Thea had already killed 1.5 gods. Why would she be afraid of a witch whose body was already half frozen? Sensing that the other party's malice was becoming more and more obvious, Thea knew that the negotiation had failed. She raised her bow and shot out a lightning arrow. Originally, a female revenge arrow was the best choice to deal with her, but he didn't know if this girl had never done anything bad or never had a boyfriend. The vengeance arrow had no effect on her, so Thea could only switch to the lightning arrow as the first attack. The regular lightning arrow didn't have the ability to travel through time and space, but as a divine arrow personally made by Zeus for Thea, its power was far beyond ordinary magic. It was currently Thea's strongest single-target attack. The arrow seemed slow, but it was actually very fast. A large number of electric arcs were constantly generated along the arrow's path. When it hit the charm witch, it even hit a huge ball of lightning. The light of the lightning temporarily dispelled the dark magic in the room. They squinted their eyes and finally saw the face of the witch. Hiss! The sound of people sucking in cold air echoed in the room. The fat woman magically hid in a group of guards and looked at the witch's dead eyes. Her heart trembled. This is a monster. I won't work in this hospital anymore. Thea didn't have time to pay attention to their thoughts. She only knew that her arrow couldn't kill the witch. Instead, the witch's zombie body resisted most of the damage. She didn't stop. She continued to draw her bow and arrows. Fire arrows rained down on the witch's head. Depressing. Thea was a little unhappy. She was also good at dark magic and mind control magic. Their skills even overlapped to some extent. If there were no outsiders, it wouldn't matter. However, there were a lot of onlookers. If she fought with the witch head-on, her heroic image would be damaged. The only thing she could do now was to rely on the magic arrows of the divine longbow to quickly deplete the witch's magic power. Under Sia's torrential rain of bullets, the few ordinary people in the room regained some of their vision. What else could they say? They ran for their lives. Some of the mentally weaker ones threw away their guns and ran while shouting, "There's a monster, run!" The whole underground facility was in chaos. The panic quickly spread to the buildings above. I'll go up and stabilize the situation. Reinforcements will be here soon. Layla finally found a good excuse and ran out after telling Thea. Thea nodded. She didn't expect her small pistol to do much damage anyway. Without her, it was more convenient for her to use her skills. Seeing Layla disappear into the elevator, Thea finally played her trump card. Clone. Her clone was telepathically connected with her and began to cast spells with her. All kinds of debuffs were applied to the witch and buffs were applied to Thea. After putting on the yellow light ring and conjuring chains to bind the charming witch, Sia didn't stop shooting arrows at all, one after another. By the time she shot her 11th arrow, the enchanted witch's body began to expand rapidly. She summoned a large amount of magic power and broke free from the chains. She had no choice but to resist. Although she had a strong body and 100 points of fire damage could only deal 30 points of damage to her, there were too many of them. Especially when Thea's clone was so agile. It was 2 against 1. You're too shameless. She suppressed the greed in her heart and began to fight back. The witch had an extremely rare teleportation ability. She instantly appeared behind Thea and clawed at her heart. That's all you got. Thea's fighting ability was one of the best in the world, and she had been guarding against the witch's attacks. Facing the witch's black claws, she pulled out the Godslayer and infused it with fire magic to block the claws. She then turned around and slashed at the witch's neck. Whoosh! The sword missed and there was a violent vibration in the air. The witch appeared on the other side of Thea and clawed at her face. Thea could only take 2 steps back to increase the distance between them. What a strange ability. The witch's fighting ability was not worth mentioning, but this teleportation ability made Thea suffer. She constantly used her agility to dodge, and it was inevitable that she would be careless after a long time. When the witch teleported for the 4th time, Thea finally discovered the principle of this ability. She could appear in any corner where her magic was. In other words, as long as the magic in the air was dispelled, her teleportation ability would naturally be broken. Chapter 308. The traditional way was to use a large amount of light magic to neutralize it, or use fire magic to burn it. Of course, it was also possible to change the battlefield and fight somewhere else. Thea could do all these methods, but she was purely helping out today. There were still a lot of things to deal with in the group, and she really did not want to waste time fighting a war of attrition. The doppelganger waved her hand and forced the charm witch to retreat with 3 light beams. She took out a dark, sci-fi weapon from the space ring. This was a combination of the technology of Captain Frigid and Mr. Freeze. It was the latest development of the Freeze gun. If Cisco Ramon's design 3 years later was 1.0 and Captain Frigid's modification was 2.0, then the gun in Thea's hand was 3.0. Cisco Ramon had made a great contribution to the design of this gun. Conservatively speaking, this gun was at least 30 years ahead of its time. Bang! Bang! Under the confused gaze of the charming witch, Sia kept pulling the trigger. The cold air that was close to absolute zero froze everything, regardless of whether it was mana or zombies. The charm witch tried to break free from the ice several times, But unfortunately, her body didn't have that much strength. Her magic power also leaned towards the dark attribute and was more proficient in corrosion and infiltration. Thawing out of this big ice block was really not an option. In addition, her mind was a little slow, so Thea did not want to talk nonsense with her. She sprayed 3 layers of ice on the inside and the outside. She put away the doppelganger and the light ring and observed the results of her battle. The effect was really good. This was the power of a technological weapon. Captain Frigid, an ordinary person, had repeatedly tricked the Flash. Although his high IQ was inseparable, this gun also played a part. Phew! Sia exhaled a breath of cold air. This room was almost freezing her, making her feel very uncomfortable. She ran out of the room in a few steps and bumped into Lila, who was about to help her. Where's the enemy? Lila stretched her neck and looked behind her. Her first thought was that Thea was defeated and was running away. Should he run with her, or should he run separately? She did not feel cold during the battle, but after the battle, it was really cold. It was reasonable that Captain Frigid wore a down jacket all year round. Thea was only wearing a short-sleeved shirt. In such a cold basement, she felt uncomfortable all over. Do you still remember Killer Crocodile from that day? It's similar to that one. I've frozen it. At this time, Lara also felt a bone-piercing chill. Thinking back to the time when they first met, she nodded as if she understood. She was no longer the person who took the lead. She waved her hand and gestured to the people behind her. You guys go and take a look. The temperature inside is very low. Don't touch it with your skin. Thea felt extremely cold in such a short time. She told Gu Yen to stay away from her and ran to the elevator alone. Halfway through the run, Thea suddenly realized something. Where was the female doctor who was thought to be mentally ill? He seemed to still be tied to the hospital bed. Did he catch a cold too? They didn't know each other, so she could only blame herself for being unlucky. Hopefully, the heavens would help her. After drinking 2 cups of hot coffee in the facility on the ground, she finally felt less cold. The design of Cisco Ramon's gun was very good, but it had high requirements for the user. Thea shivered even with her strong physique. It was hard to imagine how much pain Captain Frigid, an ordinary person, had to endure. This person's original intention was to toy with the Flash. After enduring so much, his genetic chain was damaged. She had to admit that he was a strong person. Just as she was wondering whether she should fly back or let them send her back, Lara, who was out of breath from running, pulled her back. What's that thing you've frozen? Help me explain it in detail. Otherwise, I won't be able to explain it to Amanda. Okay. I saw a part of that person's memory. She was born in a small village in West Africa about 600 years ago. She received the secret inheritance of voodoo, which was very popular at that time. The locals called her the Enchanted Witch. After that, there was a large gap in her memory. When she regained consciousness, she was already on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean in Peru. It's unknown if the early colonists transported her. The last memory she had was that careless doctor of yours who destroyed her place of hibernation. That's about the situation. Thea looked at Lara's dizzy eyes. She was also quite depressed. She thought that it was just a small favor, but who knew that it would cause so much trouble? In the original plot, Amanda could think of using the heart to control the Enchanted Witch, but now, the female doctor's host had frozen to death. Thea was afraid of trouble, so she didn't ask. She didn't know and didn't care whether the plot would follow the same direction as the plot. She reached out to greet Lara, leaving her to ponder on how to write the report. Thea didn't wait for them to pick her up and directly flew back to Star City. She thought that Amanda would come the next day, but the dark-skinned woman didn't come. Instead, a little kid came. Damian Wayne, who looked childish but had a serious expression, handed Thea a long bag. The sword you wanted. Thea opened the bag. The hilt and scabbard were 1.5 meters long and 25 centimeters wide. The whole thing was very heavy. The scabbard was engraved with magic patterns, which was a language that Thea couldn't understand. Thea didn't reach out to touch the hilt. She needed to observe it carefully. The hilt was golden, and the head of the sword was a ferocious demon's head. The arms of the demon formed the crisscrossing patterns on the hilt, and then the demon's hands interlocked to form the handguard. Thea used several methods to detect the sword, but she didn't find any traps on the sword. Then, she summoned a light ball and circled around the sword a few times, but she didn't find any abnormalities. You're too careful. Damian Wayne couldn't help but mock her. He knew what she was doing, no matter how stupid he was. Thea didn't want to talk nonsense with the little kid. Under his horrified gaze, she created a clone and instructed her to get the sword. Clang! With a crisp sound, the whole sword was pulled out. The clone and the real body exchanged information. After confirming that it was safe, Thea took the sword and looked at it carefully. What a good sword! After removing the hilt, the blade was more than 1 meter long and 12 centimeters wide. It was unknown what material it was made of, but the blade was pale white. Anyone with a normal mind would associate it with the color of bones at first glance. They could vaguely hear the wails of the dead on the sword. In the middle of the blade, there was a dark red blood groove that couldn't be seen by ordinary people, but Thea could see it with the eye of Horus. But before she could take a closer look, she felt a mysterious suction force in the blood groove, and a small part of her gaze was sucked in. Thea quickly turned her head. She waved it a few times. It seems a little light? As soon as Thea had a similar feeling, she saw that the sword seemed to sense her strength and gradually increased its weight until it matched her strength. There was no doubt that this was a divine artifact, or a demonic artifact. Thea's own Godslayer and Diana's Vulcan sword were both divine artifacts. The three swords were similar in nature, but their auras were completely different. Chapter 309. Not to mention its ability to absorb energy, the sword itself contained a huge amount of power. As a magic weapon, its attributes were very good. Thea tried to infuse dark magic into the sword, and found that the emotions transmitted from the hilt were desire, greed, and more importantly, excitement. That's right, the sword was transmitting a signal of excitement to Thea. God knew how many years it had waited, and finally, it was nourished by magic again. The blade was faintly vibrating. Thea swung the sword and withdrew the magic, and directly sheathed the sword. The sword was a little too pleased with itself. It had actually tempted Thea to go on a so-called killing spree. It would be a joke if Thea, who brainwashed others every day, was brainwashed and controlled by a sword. Thea did not directly put the sword into the ring. Instead, she looked at Damien and said, "I'm very satisfied. You can learn magic from me." Damien's little face was tense, and he was obviously relieved. As for the time and place, it was the small forest where Malcolm taught Thea. It was quiet and remote, and no one would disturb them. The original owner of the land was Old Ma, and now it was under Tommy's name. Anyway, he was still in Gotham with Laurel, so there was usually no one there. She told Damien to find a place to rest and wait for her in the forest at night. Thea continued to busy herself with the various matters of the company. It was not until sunset that she slowly walked towards the forest that had given her hope. It was the cycle of nature, and now it was her turn to give others hope. Thea recalled as she walked, but suddenly she stopped and looked not far behind her. An extremely tall and thin old man walked out from the shadows and was looking at her not far away. He was wearing a black robe with a high collar. His face was cold, and his eyes were filled with wisdom and vicissitudes. Ninja Master? Thea was a little surprised. This old man actually came out on his own. Needless to say, he must have followed Damien all the way here. Thea did not know if Damien had been honest with him, or if there was something else going on. "You know me? Child, can you really teach Damien those mystical knowledge?" Ninja Master stared at Thea with his hands behind his back. "I'm a man of my word, but his completion of the mission seems to be a little different from what I expected." Thea could tolerate failure, but she did not like betrayal. Failure was a matter of ability, while betrayal was a matter of morality. Ninja Master didn't answer her question directly. He lowered his head and organized his words. "Without my acquiescence, it's impossible for him and Talia to get the magic sword from me." Thea was dubious about this. Since it had already happened, she could say whatever he wanted. "Are you going to take back your sword?" "This time," Ninja Master answered without hesitation, "I want to see if you are qualified to hold that sword." Thea smiled. If it was 3 years ago, a Ninja Master would be the highest peak she could see. But now, he was just an old man with great martial arts skills. "How do you want to see it?" "I want to experience your magic through martial arts," Ninja Master said as he pulled out a sword from his waist. Thea glanced at it and saw that it was just an ordinary steel sword. "As you wish." Thea could feel that Ninja Master didn't have any intention to kill her. This old man was very open, or rather, he didn't need to hide his actions with lies anymore. Thea didn't use the Ring of Light or the Divine Bow. She raised her hand and threw an oil spell at his feet. Ninja Master's expression was calm. A sleeve arrow with an iron chain popped out from his left wrist and stuck on a tree trunk by the roadside. Ninja Master jumped up, stomped on the tree trunk with his feet, and took a small turn to attack Thea. TSK. Batman was indeed from the same lineage as him. Thea's hands drew a beautiful curve, drawing 2 inscriptions in the air. She opened her 5 fingers, and a small ball of white material flew out and expanded with the wind. By the time the white material reached Ninja Master, it had already turned into a large net, covering the sky and the earth. Amazing! Ninja Master could only use the same trick again. He dodged the net again and threw a dart in the air. Thea didn't move. She pointed at the center of the dart with her left hand and changed the direction of the dart with her finger. She picked up the dart with her right hand, infused it with her fire magic, and threw it in the opposite direction. Here you go. The Alliance's hidden weapon technique. Ninja Master looked at the red ball and didn't dare to take it directly. He quickly ran to the side and dodged. Boom! The fire magic made close contact with the tree and caused an explosion on the spot like a grenade. Ninja Master saw that Thea didn't move at all and was casting spells with all her strength. He knew that he underestimated this woman. He took out something from the cloth bag at his waist and threw it to the ground. Thea looked at him surrounded by smoke and was a little speechless. This old man was an enhanced version of Batman without high-tech weapons. Originally, he could only slightly change the magic circuit of a half-cast spell and turn it into another spell. Old man, you have to be careful. Watch out for my shadow leopard. She summoned a creature from the shadow realm. The leopard's green eyes looked back and forth in the smoke. Soon, it turned into a gust of wind and silently ran into the smoke. But in less than 10 seconds, the shadow leopard was directly hit. Although its body was light in the air, the fierce light in its eyes dissipated a lot. Young woman, you underestimated me. Just as Thea was thinking about what spell to use, Ninja Master came out from behind her diagonally. The two were less than 5 meters apart. Thea drew the Godslayer and blocked the opponent's slash. At the same time, she threw a punch. You underestimated me too. Ninja Master finally found this golden opportunity. How could he be willing to open up the distance between them again? The blade changed from a vertical slash to a horizontal one. At the same time, his left hand and Thea's fist collided. With a muffled bang, the two of them took half a step back at the same time. They were a little surprised. Although Thea was far inferior to Diana, the transformation of the divine power was all around. She used almost 70% of her strength in this punch, but she did not expect that the opponent's physical fitness was not bad. The punch was actually a draw. Demonized body? The only thing comparable to the transformation of the divine power was to demonize oneself. Considering Ninja Master's life experience, this was the most reasonable explanation. Thea did not use her full strength. In fact, Ninja Master was cautious all year round and also did not use his full strength. Seeing that his punch, which was far superior to ordinary people, did not take Thea down, his attitude became more serious. At this time, the Shadow Leopard rejoined the battle, 2 against 1 with Thea to deal with Ninja Master. Rope technique. Thea waved her sword in her right hand to resist the opponent's attacks. Her left hand completed a spell. As if it had a life of its own, the magic rope wrapped around Ninja Master's feet. At the same time, the Shadow Leopard attacked the middle. Thea's long sword swept towards his head. The Ninja Master's martial arts skills were really impressive. He flicked the magic rope with his sword, jumped up with his legs, and kicked the Shadow Leopard away. He didn't care about closing the distance anymore. He grabbed Sia's wrist that was holding the sword and threw her out. Chapter 3:10. However, what made the Ninja Master speechless was that although Thea was thrown out by him, she could still fly without the help of the light ring. Thea made a 360-degree turn in the air, and the long sword in her hand slashed diagonally at his wrist. Clang! The Ninja Master blocked the sword with a steel wrist guard, and at the same time, the mechanism on the wrist guard was activated. His 2 fine teeth bit the edge of the sword, and his right hand clenched into a fist and punched Thea's face. Thea suddenly turned in the air again, and her left foot met the Ninja Master's fist. With the force of this blow, she pulled the long sword out of the mechanism, and her body was suspended in the air. The Ninja Master made a sound similar to a humph from his nose. His opponent's actions did not conform to the rules of physics, which made him unable to use many of his exquisite moves. Especially when he was in the air, how could he fight? But he had nothing to complain about. Before, he had vowed that he would use martial arts to learn magic. Now he had seen magic, but the process was a bit sullen. Thea paused for a few seconds in the air, and found that the ninja master did not make any further moves. The ninja master was almost half demonized, but he did not seem to be able to fly. Was he hiding his strength, or did the demon only strengthen his body and did not give him any strength at all? If there was no accident, it should be the latter. If he dared to make a deal with the demon, he should have the awareness now. Thea respected him, but she did not sympathize with him. In the past 800 years, many families had been destroyed because of his existence. His soul was more or less contaminated with the demon's nature. Thea just wanted to use this old man to test her new move. With a smile on her face, she raised her hand and cast the dark magic she was most familiar with. A large cloud of black fog covered an area of 100 meters. Want a sneak attack? I have trained thousands of assassins. Young man, you are using the wrong method. The ninja master did not panic. He was not boasting. He must have figured out how to sneak attack and how to prevent sneak attack. Of course, Thea would not be so naive as to think that the enemy would be caught off guard. She had been referring to the charm witch's teleportation over the past few days, and combined it with her own magical theories. She had come up with a new trick. In this black fog, Thea could teleport herself to any place with magic at any time, using magic to teleport and martial arts to attack the enemy. This was also the first time she tried to combine martial arts and magic. The charming witch herself had no fighting experience. She only knew how to grab, knock, and scratch. Thea's level of martial arts and her vision for finding the enemy's flaws were much higher than hers. With the combination of the two, the ninja master, who was skilled in martial arts, was quickly beaten to a pulp. Is this also magic? Amazing. The ninja master was a little flustered at first, but he soon calmed down and methodically dealt with Thea's attack. His reaction was extremely fast. Thea continuously changed her position, alternating between real and fake movements, but she didn't cause any damage to him. But the ninja master's experience was really rich, and he quickly found a way to break the situation. The old man was born with amazing intuition, and he was familiar with the flaws of his own moves. He repeatedly guessed the position where Thea would appear. As soon as Thea teleported, she would meet his long sword. After a few rounds, she could only continue to teleport. It's amazing that a pure martial artist can practice to this extent. Thea had teleported more than 10 times, but she still couldn't defeat the ninja master. She had to say that she was impressed. Your martial arts are also good, but you practice the martial arts of the Assassin League, right? The ninja master just casually asked. He had taught too many disciples, and after 800 years, who knew how many there were? So he just said it, and didn't expect to get a formal answer. Of course, Thea wouldn't be so honest about the origin of her martial arts. The two sides exchanged a few more moves. Thea felt that her moves still needed to be improved. In theory there was no big problem, but in practice there were still some areas that were not easy to use. She didn't know if that guy had thawed. Next time, she should see if the charm witches had any tricks when teleporting. Withdrawing the black fog, the surroundings were lit up by the moonlight again. I want to see your martial arts. Thea landed on the ground, holding the sword with both hands. Although she felt that there was a gap between her and the ninja master, she still wanted to see how big the gap was. The ninja master was a little surprised. Give up your magic and compete with me in martial arts? You have courage. Except for Bruce, you are the best young person I have seen in the past 100 years. I accept your challenge. The ninja master held the sword in his right hand, pointing the tip to the ground, waiting for Thea to make the first move. He was very confident in his martial arts. After 800 years of hard practice, he had practiced all kinds of skills in the world to the peak. As long as he didn't use those mysterious means, he was not afraid of anyone. Thea's martial arts must be outstanding in the eyes of ordinary people, but in his eyes, it was just not bad. Thea suppressed the excitement in her heart. It was a rare opportunity to compare notes with a martial arts master. She was eager to know the level of her martial arts that she had practiced for several years. She didn't want to win. After all, she had only practiced for a few years. She just wanted to know her shortcomings. Do you mind if I use a bow? Thea put away the Godslayer and took out the divine longbow. She felt that it was unfair to win, so she changed to a normal bow and prepared to use her archery skills. Sure. Ninja Master didn't see where she got the weapon from, but he was still very calm. Although he didn't use a bow now, all the people who had been trained by him without exception had powerful archery skills. It wasn't strange that Sia knew how to shoot an arrow. It was normal. The divine power of the goddess of the hunt had greatly enhanced her archery skills. Now, even if she didn't use a divine longbow, her normal arrows could still cause great damage. Bang bang bang. 3 arrows were shot in an instant, and the 3 arrows almost locked the Ninja Master in any way. Since the Ninja Master could predict where she would teleport, Thea could also predict where he would most likely dodge. In a battle, it was not only a competition of experience, but also a competition of wits. Good. The Ninja Master only had time to shout, and the 3 arrows were already in front of him. He didn't panic, and he used the sword in his right hand to cut off one of the arrows. At the same time, he used his wrist guard to block another arrow. The last arrow was firmly caught by his left hand. He threw away the arrow and took out 2 throwing knives from his bag. One was fast and the other was slow. However, the Ninja Master made his first mistake since the start of the battle. He misjudged Thea's agility. Even without the help of magic, Thea's agility was far beyond the limits of an ordinary person. She reacted quickly, exerting force on her legs and leaping. In between the 3 actions of leaping, reaching a high point, and landing on the ground, she shot 5 arrows in one breath. Each arrow was faster than the last. The Ninja Master could only deal with it and didn't have time to retaliate. Thea's attack didn't stop at all. She moved quickly through the forest, and from time to time, a large number of arrows would be shot from the gaps between the trees. Chapter 3:11. If the Ninja Master did not want to take the arrows head-on, he could only continue to retreat, and the distance between the two would only increase. Many years ago, Thea used the same tactic to deal with Malcolm as she did today. However, the Ninja Master was not Malcolm. He chose to go against the flow. His tall and thin figure weaved through the rain of arrows. Using his superb eyesight and skillful footwork, he dodged every arrow by a hair's breadth. If he could not dodge the arrows, he would hit them with his long sword. The distance between the two was visibly closing. Amazing! Thea felt that her archery skills had exceeded her usual level. Even Green Arrow might not be able to reach this level in the future. She focused her mind, and her eyes wandered back and forth between the Ninja Master's steps. Her brain was rapidly calculating where the Ninja Master's next step would land. She pulled the bowstring and shot the arrow without aiming. The arrow seemed to have hit the air, but the Ninja Master felt very uncomfortable. His forward movement was interrupted, and if he took another step forward, he would be hit by the arrow. He hurriedly withdrew his foot halfway. Although it didn't cause any damage, his tiger-like momentum was directly cut in half. Momentum was something that could not be seen or touched, but it could not be ignored, unless the gap between the two was very large. There was definitely a gap between Thea and the Ninja Master, but it was far from the point where he could ignore her. Limited by the nature of the world, the Ninja Master had spent hundreds of years honing his skills, making his martial arts more skillful and natural. It was impossible to rely on the accumulation of time to practice any amazing martial arts. Thea took advantage of this and constantly looked for the Ninja Master's footsteps. After 3 arrows, the Ninja Master's momentum was completely gone. However, this person was really good. He changed his thunderous attack into the pressure of Mount Tai, slowed down his footsteps, and tried to build a new momentum, steadily pushing towards Thea. This old man had a perfect grasp of momentum. He had combined psychology and martial arts very well. Coupled with his confidence that had been cultivated for hundreds of years, anyone who faced his first attack would be scared before the fight even started. Sia knew that she couldn't let him continue to build up momentum. Otherwise, she might not be able to withstand the opponent's full-force attack with her martial arts. Thea threw away the bow and took out an ordinary steel longsword. She automatically ignored everything around her. There was only this tall and thin old man in front of her. Thea quickly rushed towards him. After closing the distance, Thea did not hesitate at all and directly slashed down with her sword. The Ninja Master had no choice but to stop his charge and use his long sword to block the attack. He had never been afraid of close combat. He turned his sword in a half-circle and changed from a block to a stab, aiming directly at Thea's face. Thea could naturally predict his change of moves. She somersaulted in the air, kicked his wrist away, and stabbed the sword in her hand towards his lower abdomen. This time, it was different from Thea's previous sneak attack. The two of them were fighting with real martial arts, and their moves were very fast. Thea consecutively switched between 3 different sword styles, while Ninja Master's sword style was probably self-created. It was heavy, steady, and had a taste of the battlefield. "Young man, your swordsmanship is not bad, but it still can't compare to mine." The Ninja Master's right hand made a feint, and suddenly the sword moved to his left hand. Thea was caught off guard, and the long sword cut a hole in her clothes on the shoulder. Although the two of them did not mention the fight, they both knew that it was more of an exchange of pointers. It was impossible for this kind of ordinary steel sword to hurt Thea, but the fact that her clothes were cut still indicated a lot of things. If it was not for the transformation of divine power, she would have been injured by this sword. Left-handed sword? Thea was a little surprised when she saw it, but that was all. Modern society was not like ancient times where warriors fought every day. There were too many ways to attack. Would it be okay to hold a pistol in the left hand? For Thea herself, casting spells with her left hand was more important. She had never practiced using a sword with her left hand, so it was not very useful. But in order to continue the exchange of pointers with this old man, Thea had to be careful of his unpredictable swordsmanship. If she was hit 17 or 18 times, she would not be injured, but it would be embarrassing. She took out a small round shield from the space ring and held it in her left hand. That's right. This was a 100% modern replica of Diana's shield. When the two of them were together, they didn't do it every day. Occasionally, they would exchange martial arts skills. This sword and shield combination was Diana's best martial arts skill. A shield. The Ninja Master's eyes lit up instantly. He was active in the late period of cold weapons, and in the early period of matchlock guns. Antiques like shields had long been retired from the list of weapons. Now that he saw Thea take out such a simple round shield, his curiosity instantly emerged. He calmly slowed down his attack, wanting to see what was so ingenious about her combination of sword and shield. Thea was influenced by Diana. At first, she just casually learned a few moves for fun, but her fighting skills were there for all to see. In addition, when the Ninja Master deliberately stepped back, she still danced vigorously. At first, the Ninja Master thought that Thea was only using it to defend against his left hand, but he soon realized that her sword and shield were very well coordinated. There was a classical beauty in the way she attacked and defended. This was definitely not a move that she came up with on a whim. This woman had a very strong foundation. Not bad. In all my years, I have never seen anyone who uses a shield so well. The Ninja Master only defended and did not attack in order to see all of her moves. He was at a disadvantage. When Thea showed him all of her moves, he still had a lingering aftertaste. But as he began to exert his strength, the battle between the two was about to be evened out. Thea struggled to hold on. To be honest, Diana's martial arts were not much better than the contemporary grandmasters of combat on Earth. She used her high attributes to crush her enemies. The combination of sword and shield that Thea learned from her was a little messy. But the divinity that she inherited from Ares, the god of war, displayed its unyielding nature. Thea slowly took a step deeper into the foundation of Diana's sword and shield. Ha! Did you come up with these moves at the last minute? As her opponent, the Ninja Master had the deepest understanding of Thea's moves. He had seen many of her moves before, but as the battle dragged on, the moves in her hands started to change slightly. Originally it was a sword attack and shield defense, but with a slight change in the moves, it became a shield attack and sword defense. When the Ninja Master changed his moves, she changed her moves accordingly. This made the Ninja Master feel a little uncomfortable. A mystic sorcerer was able to fight him, a martial artist who had practiced martial arts for hundreds of years, to this extent. Could it be that the overall quality of mages was so high? He did not know that this was all due to the divinity of the god of war. He thought that Thea could change her moves during the battle. This was a little unacceptable to him, especially when he thought about how Thea gave up her strong points and used her weak points to fight with him for so long. He felt a little uneasy. "I'm not fighting anymore." After forcing Thea back with 2 moves, the Ninja Master sheathed his sword and stood still. The old man was a man of his words. If he said that he would not fight, then he would not fight. Chapter 3:12. He did not want to fight, and Thea could not force him to. She shook her head and put away her weapon. Neither of them mentioned the demon's sword. To Ninja Master, the sword was more troublesome than beneficial. It was not a bad thing to be able to get rid of it this way. About Damien? Ninja Master asked uneasily. Logically speaking, if Damien was discovered, it meant that the mission was not completed. According to the habits of the Assassin League, this was definitely a mission failure. The result was either death or a new mission. That was why he asked. Thea thought carefully. I will teach Damien, but the favor I owe the League will be written off. Thea did not know how much Ninja Master knew about Malcolm, but it was not difficult to find out the relationship between the two. Moreover, Thea felt that the martial arts of the Assassin League had given her the capital to rise in this chaotic world. This favor could be traced back to Ninja Master. Okay, that's it. I'll leave Damien to you. Ninja Master did not hesitate. His tall and thin figure walked into the forest alone. Thea stayed where she was. After 3 minutes, a thin figure walked out from the other side of the forest. It was Damien Wayne. At this moment, the brat was a little embarrassed. I didn't know he would follow me. Thea looked at him coldly. I expected too much of you. The one thing Damien could not stand in his life was being told that he was not good enough. When he heard Thea's words, he wanted to refute, but in the end, he lowered his head. Little brat. Quite stubborn. Sia observed his reaction from the corner of her eyes. To deal with this kind of brat, you have to treat him badly. You have to make him tremble when he thinks of you. Talking about life and ideals like Batman is purely nonsense. Forget it. I'll let you pass this time. Your grandfather is still quite good to you. Sia sighed a little. The Ninja Master's preference for boys over girls was especially obvious in this aspect. If Damien was a girl, he probably wouldn't even look at him. Grandfather's health? Damien wanted to say something, but he didn't know what to say. Thea slapped him on the forehead. It felt good. Your grandfather is in good health. If you don't learn magic, he'll still be alive after you die. Damien didn't understand the problem involved. Didn't the Ninja Master know that he was asking a tiger for its skin? Thea felt that even if he didn't know at first, he should have known after so many years. However, it was easy for him to get on the boat, but difficult for him to get off the boat. The demonization was eroding his body and soul. The two of them were not relatives, so Thea didn't want to stand up for him. The power of the three-palace demon was not something that anyone could easily touch. He led Damien into the forest and instructed him to sit cross-legged. Ninja Master must have plundered a lot of magic books over the years, but no matter which one of you read them, you won't be able to learn anything, right? Thea also sat on the ground and looked at the nervous Damien. Yes, grandfather spent a lot of effort on this. We call this initial process the bloodline awakening. First of all, you don't have the method. Second, there is no one with magic power to preside over it. Last but not least, you don't have much magic power bloodline. Speaking of this, Thea was a little sad. The soul awakening cup that the swamp monster gave her was definitely a semi-divine artifact. That tattered picture scroll had also replaced the source of magic transformation to a certain extent. With all kinds of opportunities, Thea was able to achieve what she had today. How is your condition? If the bloodline awakening ceremony starts, it will consume a lot of your blood. If you faint, I can't guarantee that it will succeed. Sia asked casually. The entry requirements for this path of magic were too harsh. Some things had to be made clear. At least Damien had her guidance. His conditions were much better than when she was a blind cat that had hit a dead mouse. Damien answered quickly and firmly. I can do it. Even if I die, I won't faint. Even if it's intense pain, you can't faint. Can you do it? I can. You've lost 1/5 of your blood. Can you stay awake? I can. Okay. Then I'll take a break first. Fighting with your grandfather for half a day was exhausting. Thea jumped onto a nearby tree after saying that. Damien was still boiling with excitement. He suddenly felt a little dizzy after being hit by her. In his panic, he wanted to say something, but he almost bit his tongue. Thea naturally wouldn't be so bored as to play with a child. She was indeed a little tired. Drawing a magic formation required a lot of mental and physical effort. She decided to leave it to her clone. A pure black shadow walked out of her body. Soon, the shadow's appearance and body became the same as hers. The clone glanced at her in annoyance, then lowered its head and started drawing this extraordinarily complicated magic formation. Damien looked up at Thea on the tree, then turned to look at the clone drawing the magic formation. Previously, he had only seen Thea's clone ability in a hurry once in her office. It was far from being in such close proximity. The naughty child's mouth was wide open. He had forgotten what he wanted to say just now. The magic formation for the Spirit Awakening bloodline was troublesome and complicated. It only had one purpose. Perhaps there were some simplified versions. However, Thea only knew this magic formation recorded in the Constantine family's magic book. The clone drew for more than an hour before it was finally finished. The clone instructed Damien, "Stay here obediently. You can talk." Damien was shocked. He had always thought that this was something like a robot. However, the clone had expressions and could talk. This made him a little confused. The clone didn't say much to him and quickly returned to its original body. Thea slowly woke up. The clone's existence also consumed her stamina. However, in the night, her recovery speed was greatly increased. With the addition and subtraction, her stamina recovered quite a bit. She walked around the magic formation and checked it again. Then she took out the magic book and compared it with it. There were no mistakes. With her presiding over it, there was no need for any ancestors test. The magic power for Damien's first awakening was provided by her, so it was relatively safer. She reached out and pointed at Damien. Magic restrained his movements and brought him to the center of the magic formation. "I'm starting." Thea casually set up a soundproof barrier. If someone passed by and heard him shouting and thought that she was abusing a child, that would be ridiculous. Damien didn't care whether she could see him or not. He clenched his fists and nodded heavily. This magic was very simple. Many of the syllables could only be uttered by curling the tongue. Thea's expression was unusually serious. She chanted the incantation with her hand gestures. Her voice constantly spread through the air in the forest. Before the old echoes disappeared, new sounds rang out again. Under the rise and fall, some kind of resonance was formed. The forest was filled with an indescribable rhythm. Fortunately, this was not a battle. If one's spirit was tired, they could rest for a while. Thea rested for a total of 3 times before she finally completed the magic. She pointed her finger at a certain spot in the magic formation. The whole magic formation seemed to have activated some kind of mechanism and gradually lit up. Chapter 313. Damien originally wanted to act calm and let this woman see his manliness, but he underestimated the power of this spell and overestimated the limits of his 6-year-old body. There seemed to be something wriggling in his blood vessels, itching terribly. It felt like there was a sharp knife squeezing between his bones and skin, bringing him severe pain. 2 extreme feelings were constantly attacking his central nervous system. He only held on for less than a minute before he saw double, and there was a roar in his ears. He had received some basic training in the Assassin League, so he knew that there was nothing in front of him, and there was no loud noise in his ears. This was all because his brain could not process too much information in a short period of time, causing visual and auditory difficulties. He closed his eyes and tried to block out the noise around him, recalling the method taught by the ninja master, and tried to concentrate on what was in front of him. "Call me if you can't hold on." Damien closed his eyes and vaguely heard Thea's voice. Afraid that he was hallucinating, he opened one eye and saw that Thea was quickly flipping through a thick book with a black cover. As if feeling his gaze, Thea waved her hand. "This girl. Has she never done this before? The so-called bloodline activation, she has never tried it on anyone, right? Is she using me as a test subject?" Damien looked at Thea's serious expression and could not help but have a similar guess. Of course, it was Thea's first time casting this spell. After all, it was hard to find a person with a bloodline in modern society. Damien's talent could be said to be barely enough. If someone helped him, he would be able to enter the door. If no one helped him, he would be old enough to be a warrior. His talent was not as good, and the effect of the magic circle drawn by Thea was too strong. The combination of the two made Damien, who had a strong will, unable to hold on for more than a minute. Seeing that Damien was still clenching his teeth, Thea was afraid that something would happen to him. So she followed the method in the book and weakened the magic output of the magic circle. Phew! Damien let out a long breath. The numbness and itchiness disappeared, leaving only a piercing pain. It was much easier to bear with it alone. His eyebrows were still furrowed, but his clenched teeth had loosened. At this moment, Thea's lazy voice reached his ears again. Do you feel better now? The magic output of the magic circuit has been reduced by half, but the ritual time has been doubled. It will last for about 3 hours. 3 hours. Damien, who was trying his best to endure the pain with his eyes closed, nearly jumped up. If it was 10 minutes or 15 minutes, he could still endure it, but 3 hours. The thought of giving up had just surfaced in his mind when he dispelled it. He, Damien Wayne, would never admit defeat, nor could he admit defeat. If others could do it, he would do it too. A great opportunity was right in front of him. Thinking back to the hundreds of years of anticipation of a ninja master, wasn't it just 3 hours? Bear with it. Time passed slowly. Damien did not know how much time had passed, but he suddenly realized that he was not in so much pain anymore. Was his body numb? He used his heart to feel for a while. This was one of the factors, but more importantly, his physical fitness had become stronger. Stronger. No one knew how much Damien longed for this word in his heart. His father was not by his side when he was young. The only people who accompanied him were his mother, who was full of resentment, and the old man, who was known by everyone as the leader of the demons. Damien had set a goal for himself since he could remember. He wanted to be strong, to have power, and not let others interfere with his destiny. Although the change was slow, he could feel from his heart that was beating more and more vigorously, and his bones that were getting tougher and tougher. His physical fitness was rising rapidly. In the past, he would have to put in 10 times or even 100 times more effort in exchange for this little bit of improvement. Today, he could gain strength just by sitting here. This was the mysterious magic. He could not help but steal a glance at Thea again. Our young lady did not have the patience to watch him grit his teeth. At this time, she was resting her chin with her hand and resting with her eyes closed. Damien swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. This girl probably did not care about his gratitude, but she could fight with his grandfather for so long with only martial arts. He could not tell that she was quite powerful. Thea was not asleep. She had been secretly observing Damien in the magic circle. After all, he was Batman's son. The purpose of pretending to be asleep was that she was afraid of trouble. What was the use of receiving the gratitude of a 6-year-old child? The pain finally ended, and what followed was numbness and itchiness. Damien, whose physical fitness had improved a lot, had already expected this. He did not panic and endured it. It was as if there were thousands of insects crawling in his blood vessels. That kind of soreness was not something that ordinary people could endure. Damien hoped that the pain just now could come back to replace the numbness and itchiness. Unfortunately, he also knew that this was a necessary process. In order to become stronger, he had to continue to endure it. After some time, he finally heard Thea say, "Rest for a while and prepare for the next stage." Her voice was like the sound of nature. Damien's body was as if he had been fished out of water. His short black hair was stuck to his forehead, and a trace of stubbornness could be seen in his blue eyes. However, his hands could not help but tremble. Thea used Magician's hand to pull him out of the magic circle. The body strengthening stage is over. The next stage is the official bloodline condensation. You will suffer a lot of blood loss. In order to prevent you from becoming a cripple in the future, go to the side and move around. Adjust your body's condition. Damien panted heavily, trying to calm his breathing. Not long after, he felt that his body was different from before. First of all, the most obvious difference was that he had grown taller. Secondly, his vision was farther, and his hearing was sharper. He did a few punches and kicks. The most obvious feeling was that his strength and speed had increased by a lot. The 3 hours of suffering were not in vain. After moving around for a while, he gradually grasped the new strength and did a few somersaults. He was agile and his movements were light. Although he could do it before, it was not as easy as now. "You've recovered enough. Let's continue." After getting his consent, Thea put him back into the magic circle again and began the second stage, which was also the most critical stage of bloodline purification. The magic circle was light black before, but now it was light red. At first, Damien did not feel anything different, but soon a wave of weakness came over him. As someone who understood the structure of the human body, he knew that this was Sia's so-called bloodline purification period. A large amount of blood was artificially consumed, and the magic circle could help him extract the most essential part of the blood. This was the beginning of the path of mystery. Unlike the previous stage, where he had to grit his teeth and endure, Damien now had to deal with endless weakness. His face was getting paler and paler, and his blood was flowing out rapidly. He had to try his best to stay awake and not pass out because of excessive blood loss. Chapter 3:14. What can I do to help? Seeing Damien's pale little face, Batman, who didn't want to show his face, came out from behind the tree. Impossible. This is the most critical step for him. The bloodline can't be faked. If you give him a blood transfusion now, it will definitely alleviate his symptoms, but I can't guarantee what will happen after the bloodline is purified. Thea had felt him spying on her when she first fought with the ninja master. These 3 generations were quite interesting. On the surface, they seemed indifferent to each other, but in fact, only they knew the bond between them. Batman wasn't in the mood to chat with her. He waited anxiously. Don't worry, this magic circle is very safe. Damien is still young. In theory, the younger the bloodline is purified, the higher his future achievements will be. I'm also watching over him. To be honest, this kid's luck is much better than mine. I didn't have anyone to watch over him back then. He had to rely on himself for everything. Your son is already very lucky, Thea said, half comforting and half reminding. Sure enough, Batman's face looked a lot better when he heard that Damien's future achievements would be higher. Although he was against supernatural forces, he neither supported nor opposed his son's path. As for Thea's so-called relying on oneself for everything, he could understand. Batman didn't know how much Thea had suffered in order to gain power, but it must have been very difficult and dangerous. Now that Damien had reached this step with almost no effort, it could be said that his identity had played a very important role. He really couldn't blame anyone for not seizing the opportunity in front of him. Batman stood silently to the side and watched the results. He looked like a parent waiting for his child to take an exam. The purification process was very fast. It was over in less than 10 minutes. The light of the magic circle dimmed. Damien looked at Thea with lifeless eyes. He didn't have the strength to speak, but the meaning in his eyes was very clear. Was it done? Thea scanned Damien's body with her psychic power. Damien's body was so weak that a gust of wind could blow him away, but he had taken the most important step in his life. He already had a faint trace of magic. Congratulations, the effect is good. Phew. Damien exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. Unable to hold on any longer, he fell to the ground and fainted. Seeing Batman's eager expression, Thea knew that she had nothing else to do. Take him home and have him rest. 3 days later, let him come here to find me to officially start learning. After returning to her residence, Thea took out the demon's sword. She ignored the malice coming from the sword and examined it carefully. It had to be said that the demon's smithing skills were slightly better than the gods'. Perhaps it was because the original purpose of this sword was different. This sword was filled with madness, bloodthirst, savagery, and other emotions. Those with weak willpower would not be able to use this demonic sword. The divine sword, which had lower attributes than the demonic sword, could be used without restriction. From this point of view, it was not easy to judge which one was better. Thea didn't care about exploring the depths of human nature with her magic sword and divine sword. In a way, she was very similar to Damien. She only wanted to obtain power. She took out the Isis talisman that the dark-skinned woman gave her that day, aimed at the damaged part of the talisman, and stabbed it with the sword. A large amount of pure magic power was transmitted into her body through the sword. Thea didn't absorb it directly, but transferred most of it into the unicorn tattoo. During the 2 trips back and forth, the sudden increase and decrease in magic power caused great damage to the unicorn tattoo. In order not to affect Thea's combat power, Artha suffered the backlash of the huge drop in magic power alone. She hadn't recovered in the past 2 years. It wasn't until Thea had transmitted nearly 50% of her magic power that Artha's voice came out intermittently. Her voice was no longer that of a young and beautiful girl, but more like a cute baby's voice. That's enough. You can absorb the rest. Thea began to use the magic power to improve herself. After several transformations by divine power, her body had already exceeded the range of bloodline purification. All the organs in her body had turned golden, and there was a trickle in her blood that was invisible to the naked eye. It was as if there was a light blue circulatory system in addition to the blood circulation. This light blue liquid was her magic power. Now, the magic power in the Isis talisman had injected new content into this small river. The color was gradually deepening, and the total amount was rapidly increasing. There seemed to be a glimmer in the river, which was a sign that the magic power was about to be filled. Thea stopped absorbing and pulled out her sword. She first observed the talisman. The surface of the talisman was even more broken. Although there was a possibility of error, the talisman could still let her absorb it 3 or 4 times. About 5 or 6 years of magic power. Thea casually cast a few spells. She was still very experienced in the sudden increase in magic power. She could adapt to the increase in magic power for 100 years. This time, it was only 5 or 6 years, so it wouldn't affect her at all. The magic power of the talisman was really abundant. She believed that any mortal who put on the talisman could become a peerless mage. But whether this person would still be the same person after that, only God knew. For the first time, most of the magic power was transferred to an unknown corner by the magic sword. Thea thought that most of it was absorbed by the demons. This was also within her expectations. She was even happy to see this. If that crazy woman Isis wanted to find trouble, she would first find the demons in the 3 palaces. Thinking about that scene, it was really beautiful. In the remaining small part, Thea gave a part to the unicorn, and the rest belonged to her. Even such a small part was equivalent to her 5 or 6 years of accumulation. She had to admit that the total amount of magic power in the talisman was really powerful. Thea nervously summoned the unicorn. The response was very fast, and the unicorn that she hadn't seen for a long time finally came to her side again. The tall horse of the past was gone, and the wings on its ribs were also gone. But it was not as big as the palm of her hand when she first summoned it. Now the unicorn was about the size of a 2-year-old colt if its horn was ignored. It was cuter when it was young. Thea laughed and played with the unicorn for a while. Then she sent it back to the space to rest. Next time, there was no need to fill its deficit. All the magic power was used to improve Thea's body. Even the unicorn could grow into an adult, and Thea could use the combination skill again. The strength of the ring was too idealistic. To be honest, Thea didn't like it. When it thought that it was strong, it was really strong. When its confidence was damaged, it would immediately wither. This was a bit unreliable for Thea, who seriously lacked a sense of security. What she needed was a practical and reliable power that could be controlled by herself. 3 days later, Thea waited for the unicorn to completely recover before she began the second absorption. The total amount of magic power she could store per unit of time also increased. This time, she had absorbed about 10 years' worth of magic power. The color of the magic power had transitioned from light blue to light blue. All in all, Thea now had almost 30 years' worth of total mana. Even in the glorious era of magic, this level of mana would be considered average. At the very least, it would be reasonable for her to be called a certain mage, and no one would criticize her for it. Chapter 3:15. That evening, Thea arrived at the grove on time. Sure enough, Damien had been eagerly waiting for her for a long time. Today, I'll officially start teaching you. Thea paused. She had been busy for several days and really didn't think about what to teach Damien. She had never been a teacher, so she didn't even think about how to teach him. Is there anything in particular that you want to learn? Thea pondered. She would first ask clearly and teach him what he was most interested in. When you were fighting with grandfather that day, you moved left and right in a cloud of black fog. I really want to learn that move. Damien seemed to have thought about this problem and said hurriedly, "This brat has good taste. Is he also planning to walk the path of magic and martial arts?" Thea secretly thought, but this spell was indeed very suitable for him. It didn't have high magic requirements, but it had a much higher requirement for speed and reflexes. At least until Thea figured out the principle of Charm Witch's teleportation, she could only rely on her own high reflexes to make up for the lack of magic operation skills. Of course, I'll teach you the magic part. As for the martial arts part, Thea meant that he had a lot of martial arts masters in his family, so he didn't need her to teach him, right? Damien had dealt with her a few times and understood the general mentality of this woman. She was afraid of trouble, but there were many people who could teach him martial arts, so there was really no need to bother Thea. He immediately nodded and approved the teaching plan. Thea was very happy. This saved a lot of trouble. I said before that your attributes are dark and earth. Most of them are dark, and the earth is very little. You don't think that the light attribute is righteous and the dark attribute is evil, right? Damien shook his head very seriously. No. None of his 3 generations had anything to do with light. It would be strange if he awakened a light attribute. The dark attribute is strong in concealment and penetration. It's not as aggressive as the 4 major attributes of earth, fire, water, and wind. But in modern society, before your magic accumulation reaches a certain level, technological weapons are better than elemental magic. Damien nodded as if he understood. Thea continued. You're really lucky. Your attributes are very suitable for the current social environment. Stealth and unpredictable. That's your fighting style from now on. Hearing this, Damien was even happier. He had never intended to be a knight. Being able to secretly kill his opponent with a sword was in line with his character and family tradition. Thea taught him how to release his own magic. Damien's dark element was slightly different from Thea's. Damien's element was more aggressive, while Thea's was more flexible. There was no need to talk about which was better or worse. As long as it was used well, it could deal double the damage to the enemy. After a week of continuous teaching, Damien's basic magic power was not as good as Thea's. After all, he was still young. After puberty, the magic power in his body would usher in a period of eruption. This was also why many children of magic families would awaken their bloodlines at a very young age. They did not have the opportunity like Thea to obtain talismans or magic swords to artificially increase their magic power. What they did was to awaken their bloodlines at a young age and wait for the explosion of magic power during puberty. Although there was a certain risk, compared to the growth of magic power in adulthood, this risk was bearable. By now, Damien could already cast dark magic. Of course, in terms of the range and the density of the smoke, it was far from Sia's. But the naughty kid was still so happy that he couldn't tell north from south. Take it, Thea said as she threw him a pitch-black long sword. This was the sword of Azrael that was seized in Gotham. It had been used for a period of time. As the sword did not have a magic circle carved on it, it could only be considered a semi-finished product. Considering that this was Thea's first disciple and it was of great significance, Thea worked with Diana over the weekend to draw the magic circle of the original Black Mist dagger onto this long sword. Diana could participate in the production of Batman's Hellbat armor in the future. According to the game, her secondary profession was enchantment forger. In this era, materials were scarce and could not be created. However, it was not a problem to create a long sword according to the drawings. This is... Little Damien took the sword and found that it was a little long for him to use. However, it would be just right when he reached adulthood. He was not stupid and asked in disbelief. It's for you. The sword is very sharp. Don't cut yourself when you swing it. A dark spell circle is carved on the sword. You need to use your own magic power to guide it. It can be cast once a day. Sia said casually, as if what she was giving away was not a magical weapon, but a wooden sword and saber that could be bought on the street for $50. Damien's nose twitched a little. He turned his little face to the side and said in a low voice, "Thank you." Thea pretended not to hear. Both of them were not very good at expressing their feelings. Just like that, they began their exclusive lessons. There was a theory lesson every 3 days and a combat lesson every 5 days. However, in less than half a month, Thea could not take it anymore. She dragged Damien to Batman, who was beating up criminals in Gotham. Seeing them coming out of the dark, Batman was a little confused. He grabbed the neck of the criminal in his hand and slammed it on the ground. A severely concussed patient was born. What's the matter? Batman, who was fearless in the face of Darkseid, was in a mess. Especially when he saw Thea's unfriendly face and Damien's ashamed face, he imagined the scene of a naughty child being brought to his parents by a teacher. "This child of yours." Thea spoke in the tone of a young female teacher who was annoyed by a naughty child. "His foundation is too weak. A sorcerer is a profession that requires a lot of comprehensive knowledge. It's not like your friend in blue shirt and red cape who can do it with just a little bit of strength. Have you taught Damien any conventional knowledge?" Thea fired a barrage of words at Batman. She thought that teaching would be easy, but after a week of theory lessons, she found a big problem. Damien's basic knowledge was a mess, but he was very stubborn and pretended to know everything. However, when it came to practical application, Thea immediately knew that she had wasted a few nights to come to Gotham tonight. Batman wiped the non-existent sweat off his forehead. As a top student, he really did not know what his son had learned. He thought that the Ninja Master had taught him everything, but the Ninja Master also thought that he should teach him, his biological father. The two knowledgeable experts had an illiterate child right under their noses. This made Batman feel a little embarrassed. "I will work hard to learn." Damien felt that he was losing confidence as he spoke. He secretly glanced at Thea and Batman before lowering his head. "This book. Let him know all the words. Bruce, I'm not asking for much, right?" Thea handed a thin book to Batman. Chapter 316. Batman did not even look at what was in his hand. When he heard that it was just basic literacy, he did not have the courage to refute. He was extremely ashamed and quickly nodded. No problem, leave it to me." I don't expect Damien to have high overall qualities, but he still needs to master basic mathematics, common sense science, and Latin. My standards have been lowered again and again. I really don't want to make things difficult for you. Thea was still talking non-stop when Batman quickly interrupted her. "Don't worry, I'll work hard to teach him these few days. I'll definitely teach him. I promise." Only when Thea flew away did Batman breathe a sigh of relief. He took off his hood and his face was as black as the bottom of a pot. After hesitating for 3 seconds, he decided to let the criminals of Gotham have a few more days of fun. He needed to go back and get a feel for his son's knowledge structure. After casually testing a few questions, he realized that it was no wonder Thea was angry. This child's foundation was not bad. He had no foundation at all. This was too much. Although Damien was not even 7 years old, Batman had already self-taught a lot of knowledge at this age. Damien looked very serious and smart, but he was actually completely illiterate. The knowledgeable Batman could not stand it. He ordered his butler, Fu, to prepare supper. He would not sleep tonight. He had to let this child master the basics first. Thea's request to master the basics of reading and writing, as well as knowing addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. How could the son of the great Bruce Wayne know addition and subtraction within 10? He could not afford to embarrass himself. He rummaged through the cabinets and found a textbook that was similar to a junior high school level. He instructed Damien that he had to understand it tonight or he could not sleep. Damien also inherited his desire to excel. Without hesitation, he picked up the book and started reading. Thea threw the task of eliminating illiteracy to Batman and returned to Star City alone. After a few days of continuous absorption, the talisman of Isis finally shattered and turned into ashes. However, its destruction was still valuable. Thea had absorbed more than 30 years' worth of pure magic from the talisman. Combined with her original magic, it was less than 50 years' worth of magic. There was still a gap between him and Horace back then, but he more or less had the ability to protect himself. During the weekend, he had another big battle with Diana. Although he was still no match for Diana in terms of overall strength, it was no longer that strenuous. The matter of Central City's cutting-edge laboratory was still in the planning stage. In the original storyline, after Jared awakened, he caused a ruckus in the laboratory and attracted Reverse Lightning's attention. In order to hide Jared's existence, Reverse Lightning parted ways with the military. This event was what Thea was currently looking forward to. She would lure Reverse Lightning away and divert the attention of the laboratory so that she could enter the secret room and obtain the source code of the artificial intelligence. While everything was proceeding in an orderly manner, Thea saw off a so-called famous architect in the reception room. Holding the drawing that the expert had left for her, she rubbed her temples. The land in the metropolis had already been bought. In terms of the design plan, several of his subordinates had unanimously recommended this new designer. It was said that this person had designed many landmark buildings. Does this look funny? Thea looked at the architectural drawing in her hand and was a little speechless. Is this logo encouraging everyone to recharge? The drawing on the drawing was extremely complicated. Thea was not Batman. She did not understand architecture and did not have that much knowledge. However, she could still see the shape of the building. The entire building would form a large Q letter on the ground, representing the surname Quinn. Originally, this was not a big deal. However, there was another building in the metropolis. The building was in the shape of an L, which was the headquarters of Lex Luthor's group. A Q and an L. It was no surprise that this would be the landmark building of the metropolis in the future. Thea did not want the Q to have another surname, Merlin, and the initial letter M. After all, this was not the headquarters of McDonald's. It was not appropriate to have an M. She immediately made the decision and decided on the Q building. Just as Thea finished sorting out the various situations of the group and was preparing to rest for 2 days, trouble came to her. The assistant handed her a phone. "It's the Pentagon. What's the matter?" The voice on the other end of the phone was Superman's future father-in-law, General Ryan. The old man did not waste time with her and urgently asked her to come to the Department of National Defense. It was definitely not suitable to fly there in the daytime. Fortunately, the military helicopter arrived very quickly. Almost as soon as she put down the phone, they arrived. The few soldiers were really well trained. They did not have any questions about her workplace attire and pulled her directly to the Department of National Defense. The Department of National Defense was now more closely connected with her new group. On average, she had to come several times a month. After showing her consultant's ID, Thea entered the building smoothly. "What's the matter?" Thea entered the conference room and found that the atmosphere was extremely solemn. Almost all the generals she had met were present. Even Amanda Waller of the Heaven's Eye Society was in the corner. Amanda's expression was very strange. It was somewhere between a smile and a smile. "Take a look." As she spoke, she turned on the display in the room. The image of the person on the display was extremely blurry. It was most likely that after the scene was destroyed, part of it was restored using high-tech technology. "She's not dead." Thea looked at the dark figure on the screen. She looked like a ghost. Wasn't this the charmed witch that she had frozen a while ago? Without a host, she should have lost her ability to move. We suspect that she and Dr. Joan Munn completed a deep fusion at a special node. In other words, Dr. Joan Munn has betrayed us. Amanda's expression was calm. It was as if she was not talking about her subordinates, but an unrelated passerby. "You want me to take her down? Where is she?" Now that Thea had enough magic power, she was no longer afraid of the charmed witch. Although it was only a brief glimpse on the screen, she could tell that the fusion between the charmed witch and Joan Munn was forced. The female doctor did not have any magic power at all. It would only greatly reduce her power. "Don't worry. There's more. She has an accomplice," Amanda said and clicked on another video. A handsome young officer appeared in the video. He opened the door of the freezer and released the charmed witch. This person is called Rick Flegg. He can use all modern technology skillfully. He's an elite warrior of the Heaven's Eye Society, and also Dr. Joan Munn's lover. It's not clear if he loves his lover or is controlled by magic. Watch the next part. This is the real trouble. The young man called Rick Flegg led the charmed witch into the prison of the Heaven's Eye Society. They carefully avoided the guards and came to an ordinary prison cell. The charmed witch walked in calmly. In less than 3 minutes, a bald man covered in tattoos walked out with her. Chapter 317. His name is Chatter Santana. His code name is the Vengeful Demon. He used to be a gang member, but he somehow got these tattoos and gained the power to control fire. Amanda was worried that Gu Shijio would not know, so she kept explaining. Thea listened carefully to her explanation, but in her heart, she was full of disdain. What a bunch of amateurs. What power to control fire. That was the fire of hell, an ability that came with the demon's body. This guy was somewhat similar to Marvel's Ghost Rider, but he was weaker than Ghost Rider. After all, he was only possessing an ordinary demon. Not to mention a living person like him, even if that demon jumped out, Sia would be able to take it down with some effort. "Chatter Santana," Sia murmured, trying hard not to laugh out loud. This surname is really powerful. Could it be that he can become an Autobot? They released more than 10 criminals from the Sky's Eye Society. These two are the most dangerous. Amanda didn't know what Gu Shijio was thinking. She moved the control panel, and more than 10 pictures appeared on the screen. 2 of them had the biggest heads. The one on the left is Killer Crocodile. You've seen him before. I can only say that he's more ferocious and aggressive than when you captured him. The one on the right is George Diggle Harkness, codename Captain Boomerang. He's good at using all kinds of high-tech boomerangs. He's very powerful and very cunning. Thea looked at her in confusion, waiting for her to continue. Weren't these guys from the Suicide Squad? But now, they seem to have turned against Gu Shijio. But what did that have to do with her? She was a consultant, not a fighter. Can you deal with them? Please tell us the truth. Amanda didn't say anything, but General Ryan spoke up. Thea could not help but think. The charm which was supposed to be the strongest, but she had completely merged with the female professor, so her strength should have dropped a lot. The demon of vengeance known as Santana was about as powerful as the charm witch, who had been weakened by a significant amount. Dealing with these two at the same time would only take a little more effort, even if he had to expose his trump cards. The rest of the ordinary people were no trouble to her, so Thea ignored them. However, being able to do it was one thing, and talking to this group of people was another. Did she have nothing better to do? Was she going to work for them? Pretending to be hesitant, he asked, "What do you need me to do? Why did you call me here in such a hurry?" General Ryan hesitated for a moment before deciding to tell the truth. They kidnapped Mr. Minister and threatened him with his life to kidnap the leader of the Heaven's Eye Society, Steve Trevor. Unlucky Steve Trevor. Sia looked at the dark-skinned avatar thoughtfully. No wonder this woman was still smiling even after such a big thing happened. If it weren't for the fact that the situation wasn't right, she would have gathered her subordinates to celebrate. Mr. Minister knows a lot of secrets. If you leak them out, the consequences will be. General Ryan looked a little flustered. This old man was as stubborn as a rock, but in general, he was still very patriotic. "Mr. General, forgive me for telling you the truth. The other party is known as the Charm Witch. You should be able to guess a lot from this name. If she wants to, the country's secrets are not guarded against her." Thea explained immediately. Leaking secrets would be troublesome, so she had to make it clear in advance. The Minister of National Defense was an old bureaucrat with a negative willpower. It was impossible to expect him to resist the Charm Witch's magic. General Ryan knew this too. He swallowed his words and said, "We beg you, please save Mr. Minister." Just save him? Thea felt that General Ryan wanted to kill the Minister of National Defense, but it was too shocking. No matter how brave he was, he wouldn't dare to say it out loud. "Yes, save him. Save the minister first," Avatar emphasized. It was okay if Thea couldn't save Steve Trevor. "Where are they? Did the satellite detect them?" Thea asked. "Sir, the satellite shows that they are approaching Midway City. They are less than 30 miles away from the city in the northeast corner." A sergeant controlling the satellite didn't see Thea's military rank, but he knew that she was not an ordinary person by looking at her power. He vaguely called her Sir. "Wait for me," Thea said to the people in the room. Without waiting for their response, she went outside, avoided the satellite's detection orbit, and directly rose into the air. She used the Eye of Horus to look into the distance. Midway City was also one of the largest cities in the United States in this world. The size of the city was similar to Star City and Central City. In her impression, it was the territory of Eagle Man and Eagle Girl. However, at this time, Thea didn't find any trace of these two silly birds. Was it because the time was not right and they hadn't awakened their memories, or was it because Horus's death and the timeline was chaotic? Thea didn't know. This city wasn't far from Star City. They had participated in the city's railway project. Thea had also been there several times. She found the right direction and looked in the direction. The Eye of Horus quickly collected a lot of information. Thea filtered it one by one and found the Charm Witches group 3 minutes later. There were quite a lot of them, but not only were there more than 10 criminals, Thea also saw many fully armed soldiers with guns. If she was not wrong, they were Rick Flagg's subordinates. In modern society, loyalty was too low. It was impossible to betray the country directly for the sake of their superior. These people had been brainwashed. More than 30 people were sitting in 2 trucks. Most of them looked forward with blank expressions. The respected minister was tied up like a dumpling and was still in the truck behind. The Charm Witch was focused on reading his memory. As if she sensed Thea's spying, she stopped what she was doing and looked around nervously, but found nothing. Thea waited for the Charm Witch to relax and suddenly made a move. The yellow light ring had given her a lot of knowledge about space. Although it was more on the physical level, it was still very useful. Thea had begun to study teleportation after she had enough magic power. Now she had made some progress. A light blue portal opened beside the Minister of Defense. Thea reached out a hand from behind the portal and pulled him directly into the portal. The Charm Witch's attainment in spatial magic was not low. However, her strength had been severely damaged after fusing with Joan Munn. After hesitating for a while, she was afraid that there would be an ambush. In the end, she gave up the idea of pursuing. "Our minister has been rescued by me," Everyone in the meeting room was dumbfounded when they saw that she had dragged an old white man back in less than 3 minutes. Fortunately, there was no shortage of flatterers in this world. A few of them hurriedly surrounded the Minister of Defense and asked about his well-being. It was very lively and bustling. Chapter 3:18. It took the minister a long time to recover from the shock. Coming through the portal was a terrible feeling, as if a box of sardines had been stuffed into a narrow container. It was cramped, but there was a huge force pushing him from behind. If the minister could be interviewed about his feelings at that time, he would definitely say, "I want to die." Until Sia pulled him into the meeting room, his memory was blank. He had not recovered from the beginning to the end. Now that he saw a few of his former lackeys nagging in his ears, he finally recovered from his dazed state. Looking at the familiar environment in front of him, he almost burst into tears. "I, this old man, have actually come back for no reason." General Ryan pushed a few flatterers to the side. With his status, he was not afraid of the Minister of National Defense. He instructed his subordinates to check if the minister was the real person. A large number of people were busy checking his pupils and blood, and a large number of password inquiries. Amanda pretended to be very serious at this time. She stood straight with a dark face, but in fact, she was laughing in her heart. If those criminals killed Steve Trevor in a rage, it would be a great thing. Although these people ruined her ex-team's plan, compared to Steve's life, it was nothing. There were criminals all over the streets. When the time came, there would be an exchange of benefits and moral ties. They could always use superheroes to capture a few more. However, there was only one Steve. As a national hero and the founder of the Heavenly Eye Society, his personal prestige was unparalleled. After fighting with him for so many years, Amanda knew very well that as long as Steve did not betray the country would not do anything to him. The more she thought about it, the happier she felt. Although she knew that this was not the right place, she could not help but ask Thea softly, "Where is Steve?" "I don't know. I didn't see him." Thea really did not see him. There were only 2 cars, and he was most likely detained in the car in front. She saved him and left. In her mind, she did not even see Steve as a person. Amanda was very satisfied with this answer. She looked down at her feet, afraid that her joy would be seen by Thea or anyone else. A lot of people were asking the Minister of National Defense if he had leaked any secrets. Thea felt that he had leaked a lot, but it was none of her business. She got up and was about to leave. "Miss Quinn, don't go. Please stay a little longer." General Ryan saw that she was about to leave and hurriedly stopped her. "I still have things to do." "No matter what it is, we will help you solve it." Thea stared at the old general with a faint smile. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a reporter named Louise Ryan from the Daily Planet wants to interview me. "What do you think?" Old General Lionheart almost choked on his anger. He was also helpless against his daughter, who was 100 times more courageous. However, he had already said it. Whether it was public or private, he was the only one who could do it. "I'll call her and explain." Old General Moo bitterly ran to the side to make a call. In fact, Thea didn't really want to leave either. Regardless of how long it would take, she was the one who saved him. He was such a high-ranking official, so she should at least get some benefits before he could leave. Compared to the Parallax Demons and Ares, the Charm Witches were nothing. Even though General Lane had already walked to the side, Louise Lane's voice could still be heard through the phone. Thea could hear the voice of this famous female reporter from afar. Clark Kent had commented on his wife's article, saying that she had the spirit to compete with a fierce tiger. Reading it made one shudder. According to Thea's understanding, this meant that Louise Lane was a very fierce person. Now, this fierce woman was scolding her own father because General Lane had disrupted her interview steps. General Lane laid out the facts and reason. After a long round of words, he finally put down the phone and nodded at Thea. At this time, a staff member whispered a few words in his ear. General Lane's eyebrows furrowed. After thinking for a while, he asked Thea, "Miss Quinn, the minister's memory after he was kidnapped is blank. Do you have a way to restore it?" "I'm just a little faster. I don't have any profound skills." Thea flatly refused. Mind control and mind reading were the most taboo abilities for politicians. In fact, 2 small spells, mind control and mind backtracking, could solve the problem. However, Thea would never admit that she had this ability. General Lane's expression relaxed slightly, But soon he put on a sorrowful expression. He nodded and went to study the minister's memory. Immediately, Thea settled down in the Ministry of Defense. From time to time, she would call the corporation and read some books. She had to admit that these people had really come up with a solution. They had found or captured 3 master hypnotists and each of them hypnotized the minister. In the end, the result of the comparison made them very depressed. The minister had said more than half of what he should and shouldn't have said. Except for the nuclear weapons, which were still under the president's control, the rest of the conventional passwords had basically been obtained by the enemy. With the elite soldier Rick Flegg leading the way, it wasn't difficult to find a few intercontinental missiles. The people who had been sucking up to the minister were now silent. If only 1/10 of the information leaked by the minister were to be spread to an ordinary person, they would be executed without trial. However, he was now the most powerful person in the room. They were a little hesitant. Should they put him under control first or report to the government first? I'm automatically suspended. General Lane will handle the follow-up for now. The Minister of Defense had been dealing with politics for half of his life. He knew his situation all too well. Although he was very reluctant to give up his power, he had no choice but to announce his temporary resignation as if his father had died. The people who were qualified to compete for the minister's position all had their own understanding of what he meant by temporary handling. When the time came, the president would still need to decide who to nominate in private. However, this old man's career was over. If there were no major consequences, he might be able to retire peacefully. If the consequences were serious, he might not even be able to see the sun tomorrow. General Lane, who was temporarily handling the follow-up, took over the command without hesitation. He pondered for a few seconds and felt that Thea was still the main force. Mississippi Lane, is there anything your new corporation needs our help with recently? Was this the negotiation of conditions? Thea watched as they put on a show of peaceful evolution. The minister that she had saved had abdicated directly. This made her a little depressed. Damn it. She was still inexperienced. She should have negotiated conditions before saving someone. General Lane was now openly negotiating with her. In fact, it was very smart of him to do so. The new minister was still undecided. If the conditions were too high, he might not be able to take over the position. It was useless to just agree to them. If the conditions were too low, Thea would be at a disadvantage. Thea rejected several proposals one after another. After repeatedly weighing the pros and cons, she finally stated her conditions. The Lane Group is interested in the development of high-tech and new energy sources. We hope to invest in the Red House Laboratory. Chapter 319. The Red House Laboratory. It wasn't just General Ryan who was pondering. A few of the potential successors to the throne lowered their heads in thought. The Red House Laboratory had collected all the extraterrestrial technology that the United States had found from all over the world. Every year, Dr. Sareth Stone would provide them with some results in the field of civilian technology. However, the advanced weapons that they strongly requested had always been delayed. Both the Pentagon and the White House were dissatisfied with this. This time, clearing the Red House Laboratory out of Washington was not without warning. Thea had previously investigated the recent situation of the laboratory when it moved to Detroit. It was definitely not good. There was a huge shortage of funds, personnel, and space. Dr. Sareth Stone had been soliciting donations everywhere, but the results were minimal. The doctor had repeatedly hit a wall. He thought that it was a financial problem, but it was actually a very obvious political problem. Thea hoped to use this incident to plant a nail in the laboratory. Thea was also very particular with her choice of words. She said that the laboratory would not be in the lead, which was acceptable to the military. Leon and a few of the most experienced and promising people exchanged glances. This condition was neither too big nor too small, but it was just within the range of what they could accept. The few of them gradually nodded. No matter who the future minister was, this was a collective opinion. The Department of National Defense can accept the Quinn Corporation's intentions. We will definitely defeat all enemies together. General Ryan made the decision on the spot. They agreed to this matter, but the premise was that Thea had to work with them to defeat the enemy. Thea naturally did not object. She put away her notebook and took off her lens. What do you want me to do? General Ryan also did not know what to do now. In less than a minute after taking over the position temporarily, he already felt a mountain of pressure on his face. For a moment, he could not think clearly. He could only say vaguely, "We have to stop them starting a war." Thea nodded. She knew that he did not have any ideas at all, but she did not say anything. Anyway, she would wait. She was not the one who was anxious. General Ryan was very satisfied with her attitude. He happened to see the black woman, Amanda, and immediately had an idea. "Commander Amanda, regarding the rescue of Steve, we still need the help of the Sky's Eye Society. Does the Sky's Eye Society have any good ideas? We can talk about it." Amanda, who usually traveled all over the world and flew around the world 3 times a day, did not go anywhere today. She had been sitting on the bench in the Department of Defense, waiting for the men's inquiries. She could not wait for Steve to die right now. Rescue? You're kidding. But she couldn't tell the truth. Besides, she didn't have a solution. Even if she had a solution, she wouldn't say it. Every minute that passed increased the chances of Steve dying. The black-hearted woman pretended to be very helpless and shook her head. Her voice even sounded a little choked. "My thoughts are scattered. I can't do anything." General Lionheart himself was in a mess, so he didn't care about her little thoughts. He nodded and went to discuss with his subordinates. "Where's Batman?" "Usually he's always there," Sia whispered to Amanda when she saw that no one was around. "I don't know. His phone line has been cut off. We haven't seen him in Gotham for the past 3 days, and we haven't been able to contact him either." Amanda was also a little puzzled at the mention of this. A few of the undercover agents in the Gotham Mafia family had said that no one had seen Batman before. There was something fishy about this whole thing. Thea laughed secretly. Most likely, Batty was in seclusion to teach Damien about culture and knowledge. For the sake of his son's bright future, he had even stopped fighting crime. It was not easy being a parent. She didn't lament for long. General Lionheart came back. "Organize an elite team to attack the enemy and eliminate them all. Can you do it?" Thea thought about it. She shouldn't be too involved in this matter. Who would take responsibility if Steve died? Who would take responsibility if the secret was leaked? She would only be a helper. She definitely wouldn't be leading the team. "I'm only in charge of the 2 supernatural guys. The rest of the ordinary people and the follow-up will be yours." Lionheart agreed without hesitation. This was similar to their plan. He looked at Amanda again. "The Sky's Eye Society also needs to help. How many candidates are left in your previous Plan X?" "I've agreed to all the plans. Send all of them to plant bombs." This time, it was not a discussion but an order. As a subordinate of the Department of Defense, Amanda had to agree. Her answer was simple. "Understood, General." Since she was going to participate in the operation, she couldn't fight monsters in her office attire. Thea chose to transform into the yellow light ring. The yellow light ring did not conflict with magic. With a long cloak, she looked a little like a magician. The few parties moved quickly. Thea only waited for half an hour before she saw her teammates. She had to admit that the world was really small. There were 2 familiar faces, and the other 2 were people from her memory. The most eye-catching one was a tall man. He was 1.9 meters tall, and his body was as strong as a wall. Even standing there calmly, she could feel his murderous intent. This man was Slade Wilson, codenamed Death Knell, whom Thea had fought on Purgatory Island. He was her brother Oliver's friend and mentor. Seeing him in the Department of Defense with his eyes intact, Thea knew that without Shadow in the middle, his friendship with Oliver had not been broken. The other familiar face looked terrible. It was the clown girl who was captured by Thea in Gotham. She was controlled by the bomb planted in her body. General Lionheart gave her a brief introduction. He pointed to the 2 men on the left and introduced them. "These 2 are internationally famous mercenaries. The tall one with 2 knives is Death Knell. The short one with dark skin is Death Knell." "Death Knell?" Thea looked at the guy who was adjusting his gun. This guy was not a criminal, but a mercenary. It was strange to think about it. The 2 women on the other side. You might have seen the clown girl before. The other one is an agent of the Heaven's Eye Society, codenamed Katana. Sia couldn't help but look at the Yamashiro couple who were wearing a white mask and a Japanese-style armor. They were also Oliver's good friends. Looking at the date, it should be around the time that her son passed away and her husband joined the Assassin Alliance. Amanda actually sent her, who had just lost her son, out? How cold-blooded. Shouldn't she at least let her rest for a few days?
Child, what do you have to make us wait for you?
The first to speak was Death Knell, Slade Wilson. Thea was not wearing her red clothes today, so he did not recognize her. Child my ass. Slade was an intelligent, skilled, and magnanimous man. His only flaw was that he liked to act like a senior and called everyone a child. Thea was a little annoyed. A ninja master was more than 800 years old. It was fine for him to call Thea a young person. Who the hell were you, Slade? Chapter 320. At first, she didn't want to bother with them. She just wanted to complete her mission when she arrived.
However, as soon as Richard spoke, the others all looked at Thea suspiciously. Even General Leon was staring at her.
Thea knew she had to show them what she was capable of. Since you want to see, I'll let you see to your heart's content. She took out the parallax book from the void. The golden book immediately attracted everyone's attention.
What is this? My body. Not many people could face the fear in their heart without batting an eyelid.
People like Sinisto and Batman had gone through several rounds of psychological training. They knew what they were afraid of, and they had to go through a lot of mental processes to overcome their fear. It wasn't that Thea was looking down on these people, but they were still far from that level. Lisa Draka, the controller of the original Parallax book, had a very flamboyant saying which was quoted by Sia here.
She put away the Parallax book and said loudly, "My understanding of fear is second to none."
Although she only took out the book and shook it before putting it away, everyone was still in a bad state. Ha! Thea couldn't help but be attracted to the ugly girl. Of course, it wasn't because of her beauty, but because she was able to resist the attack of her fear. Although her legs were trembling, she was still able to stand.
One had to know that the bear-like brawny man, Slade, was half kneeling on the ground with his teeth clenched and veins popping all over his body.
Was it because of the madness? That was the only answer Thea could think of. If the ugly girl could resist it, did that mean the clown was immune to fear as well? Other than the ugly girl and Richard, everyone else was lying on the ground. Katana, who had just lost her son, was in the worst state. Her mask had fallen off, and her pretty face was covered in tears and snot. She was in so much pain that she wished she was dead. Thea, who was also a woman, sympathized with her. She knew that she had accidentally hurt her with her AoE attack. She felt bad, so she raised her hand and cast an enhanced version of fear resistance. The power of magic was just that unscientific. The few of them stood up one after another. The one who was in the best condition was actually Slade. He muttered in a low voice, "Psychic, it's psychic again. I hate this bunch of psychics." Ignoring his muttering, Thea's eyes were attracted to the ugly girl again. Her fear resistance didn't work on the girl. She was still the same as before. Is she that powerful? Her magic resistance is so high. She doesn't take debuffs or buffs. The world of mental patients is indeed full of unknowns. Idiot, I'm going to kill you. Katana, who had gotten up from the ground, didn't care about the mask anymore. She pulled out her sword and slashed at Thea. Thea felt guilty, but that didn't mean she was going to stand there and take the hit. The distance between them was visibly shortened. She waved her left hand in the air and compressed the air with her magic. They heard a muffled sound, and from 5 or 6 meters away, they saw Thea waving her left hand and slapping her opponent away. I didn't do it on purpose. I apologize. Sia lowered her attitude slightly.
As for whether the other party forgave her or not, that was none of her business.
Katana seemed to have been sent flying a few meters, but she didn't use much force. She quickly got up. She was still upset when she heard Thea's apology, but she couldn't beat her. She could only follow the tradition of her ancestors and put on her mask. Hurry up and go. Amanda will be in charge of the command. General Ryan seemed to have seen something terrifying.
He said a few words and waved his hand to let them go.
They boarded the military transport plane.
Amanda, in her military uniform, began to tell them about the strategy.
The most powerful enemies are the Charm Witch and the Vengeful Demon. Yellow Lantern is in charge of them. Amanda introduced the enemy. Yellow Lantern was a name Thea came up with casually. The other three are Rick Flag, Captain Boomerang, and Killer Croc. Speaking of Rick Flag, Amanda felt that it was a pity. He was such a good subordinate with excellent tactics and a quick mind. Regardless of whether or not he was bewitched by the enchantment witch,
The orders from the higher-ups were very simple. Kill them all.
Amanda was no match for them. She wanted to plead for mercy several times, but she held back the words when they reached her mouth. In the eyes of the higher-ups, the life and death of a soldier was not worth their time at all. Amanda's tone became heavier as if she was talking to herself. Kill all of them. Leave no one alive. Their abilities are like this. Thea was too lazy to listen to this nonsense. Those monsters were just a matter of magic to her. If she attracted their attention in advance, she could even take out the parallax book to kill them all. She had to adjust her condition to deal with the charm who had regained her body. The military transport plane was very fast. Amanda answered a call and said to them anxiously, "The enemy has occupied the city square and is shooting high-power military electromagnetic pulses. The transport plane can't get through. The citizens are panicking. You have to start the operation immediately."
Start the operation.
Parachute down and fight. They took out their parachutes. There were more than 10 agents of the Heaven's Eye Society with them. They were all fully armed. Other than the clown girl who kept laughing, everyone else was a little nervous. "I'll go down and wait for you guys," Thea said calmly. She flew out of the cabin and landed on the ground like a meteor.
Damn Desper.
Slade, who was burly like a brown bear, was very unhappy. He didn't call the others and jumped down with his parachute. The enemy's electromagnetic pulse had disrupted Avatar's assault, forcing the team to scatter and enter the city. Needless to say, this was definitely the idea of Rick Flegg, who was familiar with the Heavenly Eye Association's fighting style. Avatar didn't think that his proud subordinate could turn back now because of Dr. Joan Munn. Avatar didn't think that his subordinate could turn back. Being killed was probably his only choice. Ignoring Amanda, who was panicking outside the city, Sia landed alone at the edge of the city. Initially, she wanted to wait for a few of her teammates to come over before rushing in together. However, seeing that they were all jumping around with their parachutes, she could only give up on the idea and walk slowly into the city alone. "Child, you're really not in a hurry." A low voice sounded beside her ear. She saw Slade wearing his signature combat suit, a red and black mask, and carrying 2 swords on his back. He had a variety of weapons on him, including a dagger on his wrist and a pistol on his leg. The satchel at his waist was also bulging with grenades. Slade landed not far from Thea. He got himself a motorcycle in a corner of the city. He saw Thea from afar and chased after her. "If you call me child again, I'll kill you. Do you believe me?" Thea said with a grin. Chapter 321. Slade was wearing a mask so his expression couldn't be seen. He knew that she was joking, but she was also serious. He immediately nodded, threw away the motorcycle, and followed her slowly to the city center. His idea was simple and smart. Now that the team had split up and entered the city, if they were unlucky and were surrounded, it would be very troublesome even with his extraordinary skills. Therefore, following this unknown person in yellow was a very wise choice. Thea could guess his thoughts. If he wanted to follow her, then so be it. Now that she was stronger, Thea didn't care so much about the so-called memory. Slade was a person with high qualities in all aspects and was very charming. If she could recruit him, he would be a very strong helper. Bang! Bang! The sound of handguns and rifles rang out at the same time. 2 gunmen jumped out from the front and left and opened fire at the 2 of them. Just as Slade was about to dodge, he saw Thea casually conjure 2 yellow shields, which easily blocked the bullets. The 2 gunmen were a little stunned. They wanted to take a closer look at what it was, but they met Thea's gaze. Now that she was more proficient in using fear, Thea could use the Eye of Horus to easily inject fear into the minds of others. This was not a spell. From a certain point of view, it was more like an instinct. If one were to look deeper, her eyes could now be called Horus's eyes of fear. The 2 gunmen collapsed to the ground. Slade didn't hesitate. He jumped up and easily finished them off with a slash. "Your ability is really strange. You can affect people who see you?" Slade asked, not knowing what was going on in his mind. "They, including you, don't see me. They see the fear in their hearts." This was very pretentious, but Slade's worldview was very firm. He felt that this was too idealistic and mysterious. "Is this an illusion?" He was still trying to explain the mysterious thing about Thea with something he could understand. "This is just the pure power of emotions. Illusions are relatively more powerful. This is not an illusion." As Sia spoke, She even demonstrated her high speed. The speed of the yellow light ring was the best among all the lights. Slade only saw a blur in front of his eyes. Sia had already gone back and forth several times. Between the two of them were 4 or 5 criminals in black and fully armed soldiers. Did this even take 2 seconds? Slade looked at them carefully. Yes, they were all enemies that the Sky's Eye Society wanted to eliminate. They were exactly the same as the 2 people he had just killed. Looking at you, you've been strengthened, right? Was it a body modification? Thea asked casually as she patted the dust off her hands. It's a human enhancement injection. Slade answered. It wasn't hard, but he wasn't going to tell her the details. So this guy injected with Miraculou? Did he leave Purgatory Island? Thea felt that her guess was almost correct. He was very egotistical, unlike Oliver, who was a saint. He wouldn't save people just because he saw them suffer. His moral character wasn't that high, because his departure meant that Oliver couldn't escape the fate of falling into Amanda's hands. The Owl Court spies in Hong Kong had also passed on some information. Their reports mentioned that 3 of the Sky's Eye Society's agents were fighting against American extremists in Hong Kong. The 3 of them were Thea's brother, Oliver, and the Yamashiro couple. It could be said that Slade and the Japanese woman named Katana met Oliver around the same time, but they didn't know each other. Fate was a strange thing. What are you laughing at? Do you think that my power is too weak? Slade thought that Thea was mocking him. No. You're too sensitive. I admire you. You have brains and courage. You know what you need. But you're a little narrow-minded. You only see this palm-sized place in front of you. You don't know how big the universe is or how many intelligent life forms there are. You only see Earth and the US dollars. Thea's words were blunt, but Slade ignored her sarcasm. He grasped the core of Thea's words. Outside Earth? Do aliens really exist? What do you think? Thea asked with a half-smile. The atmosphere between the two was a little dull. As Thea's power increased, she urgently needed to make her voice heard on the world level. She couldn't lose her identity as a hero on the surface, but she also needed some help in the dark to do things that were inconvenient for her. There were many internal conflicts in the Owl Court, and she could only control them remotely, so they were less and less helpful to Thea. She urgently needed some subordinates who could help her, but she also had to prevent these people from betraying her. The solution she thought of was the Yellow Lantern Corps. Thea wanted to recruit 10 subordinates, and 3 of them who were stronger would be directly accepted by the Yellow Lantern Corps. The current candidates were the Dead Man and Gertrude, and there was one more undecided. The remaining 7 people would be the guards and fighters on Earth. They would accept Diana's imitation of Thea's Yellow Lantern Ring. They would have some of the abilities of the original Yellow Lantern Ring, and they would be controlled by Thea. Among the 7 people, the first candidate was Death Knell, Slade Wilson. Slade's martial arts were considered good among the people on Earth, but it was nothing in the eyes of Sinisto. On the other hand, Gertrude was much stronger. It was a long distance, 0 cooldown, and 0 consumption mind control. If one didn't take precautions in advance, not many people could withstand the mind control of a gorilla. Of course, this was just a plan. Thea needed absolute elites. If Death Knell was unwilling, she wouldn't force him. After all, there were too many candidates in this world, and in order to gain power, there were many people crying and begging for help. Slade didn't reject her invitation, but he didn't agree either. He needed to carefully weigh the pros and cons. Whoosh. Whoosh. A silver-white metal dart flew towards the 2 of them. Sia conjured a yellow shield to block the enemy's sneak attack. It's Captain Boomerang. I'll deal with him, Slade said and chased after Captain Boomerang, who was preparing to escape after his sneak attack failed. This target was just right for him. He definitely couldn't beat 2 supernatural guys. Killer Crocodile was more than 3 meters tall and had immense strength, so he didn't want to waste his effort. Captain Boomerang was just an ordinary person who knew how to play darts. He just needed to bring his head back to report, and this mission would be considered completed. Slade left alone, and Thea continued to go deeper into the city center. Not long after, she heard continuous gunshots. She looked up and saw Archer of Death shooting at 7 or 8 gunmen, including Rick Flegg. This person was very good with guns. He was only one person, but his firepower was extremely strong. The high-powered silenced pistol on his wrist was firing fiercely. He even looked like he was suppressing a group of people. Thea took a few glances and didn't care. Chapter 322. The other battlefield was a battle between two ladies and a brainwashed killer crocodile. The ugly girl was very unlucky as she parachuted into the river in the city. Before she could understand what was going on, she was suddenly attacked by the killer crocodile. However, the ugly girl's skills were not bad. With some enhancements, she stuffed the killer crocodile's mouth with her bat and pulled the trigger with her pistol. The killer crocodile was much taller than when Thea first saw him. His atavism was even more obvious. It was impossible to tell that this guy used to be human. After being shot several times, he went crazy. He grabbed the ugly girl's arm and wanted to throw her to death. Fortunately, the Japanese woman, Katana, arrived at the critical moment. She used her skillful martial arts to save the ugly girl. The two of them supported the killer crocodile. Looks like they've all entered the battle. Am I the only one left? Thea muttered to herself as she flew up. She quickly approached the city center square. Unsurprisingly, the charm witch and the vengeful demon were there. You again! The government's lackey. Seeing Thea again, the charm witch immediately recognized her from her aura. It's a good blend. His American English is really good, Thea said playfully. She only had a quick glance when she rescued the minister last time. Now she had the time to take a closer look. The exact process was unknown, but the scene could still be guessed. Dr. Jean Munn's body couldn't withstand absolute zero, and the enchantress had magic power but no body. In their moment of despair, the two completed a deep level of fusion. This was a comprehensive fusion of mind, body, and soul, and there was no longer any distinction between them. It was probably because of this that Rick Flegg finally made the decision to tread the path of treason for his lover. It could be said that the original Dr. Joan Munn and the charm which no longer existed. Now, standing in front of Thea was a new enemy with the personality of the charm witch. After regaining her body, the charm witch's spellcasting ability was finally restored. Moreover, with a body, she could continuously absorb new mana from her surroundings, no longer having less mana than before. However, in order to prevent Dr. Joan Munn's body from freezing to death, the charm witch had to cut off more than half of her magic power that was not compatible with Joan Munn's. Her current strength was less than 50% of her peak. Laugh all you want. You won't be able to laugh in a moment. The enchantress glared at Thea and turned back to continue her spellcasting. Was this guy joking? Thea took a closer look. There were a large number of unconscious citizens piled up in front of the charm witch. At a glance, there were at least tens of thousands of people. The charm witch was chanting a language that Thea could not understand. Transparent tentacles were constantly reaching into the bodies of the citizens, bringing a large amount of blood back to the charm witch. It seems to be a spell to increase the potential of one's bloodline? Thea had never seen this spell before, but she could still see the principle behind it. It was similar to the process she used to purify Damien's blood and extract magic power from it. However, the charm witch didn't want to extract magic power. She wanted to improve her body's magic affinity through a large amount of blood infusion, purification, and acquired enhancement. Originally, Dr. Joan Munn had no physical fitness, and she used this bloody method to artificially create a magic physique. It must have been hard on her to go through so much trouble. Thea somewhat sympathized with her, but she still had to fight. Thea pulled out the frost gun and pulled the trigger at the charm witch. If she was a hero of justice, she would have shouted a few nonsense words like, "Put down your weapon and resist." But Thea did not have such a problem. The refrigerant and the ultra-low temperature reactor quickly operated, and a large amount of frozen gas was spewed out. Stop her! The charm witch shouted at Chatter Santana, the vengeful demon covered in tattoos. It was obvious that Chatter Santana was not brainwashed by her. His eyes were full of helplessness, but he still stepped forward. His hands were on fire, and he resisted Thea's frozen gas. His dark black flames were indeed extraordinary. For a moment, they were on par with the frozen gas. I don't want to be your enemy. I just want to see my family again. Although the flames and the frozen gas were on par, Thea's was a technological weapon. She did not consume any of her own energy. Chatter Santana was using his own energy. Every bit of energy had to go through the circulation of his body. In less than a minute, the temperature of his flames was not as hot as before. Stop resisting. We will help you. This guy is killing innocent people. Can't you see?
Thea did not know what the charm witch said to him.
She was trying to pull him back to her side. This.
Chatter Santana was not blind. Other than the fact that the charm witch was a little cleaner, it was no different from a blood sacrifice in the movies.
Think of your family that you killed. When I recover my power, I will let you see them again. The charm witch, who had regained her body, was not as quiet as before.
Thea was talking about the morality of the masses, but she was talking about personal interests.
Chatter Santana thought about it and finally made up his mind. He said to Thea, "Sorry, I have to stop you." What a joke. Do you think you can stop me with the power of that low-level demon? Thea raised her eyebrows.
She believed the words of the 3 palace demons, but the nameless demon in Chatter Santana's body was not enough.
I will show you what a demon is. A former gangster and an African black witch who had been sealed for hundreds of years. Thea was ready to show them a real demon. The yellow light ring operated at full power. A large amount of fear was manifested by the yellow light ring. The square was shrouded in thick, dark yellow smoke.
Both the charm witch and the vengeful demon focused their gazes on it.
When the smoke dissipated, the first thing they saw was its demonic aura.
It had a pair of curved horns that resembled a ram's, and its eyes were filled with a terrifying aura of fear.
There seemed to be sulfur dripping from its mouth. With a wrist blade on its slender arms, the demon seemed to be very dissatisfied with the smoke. It pushed both of its hands to the sides, and the smoke instantly dissipated. The demon slowly walked out, its inverted hooves stomping on the ground. Its huge tail kept whipping around. It seemed to be very dissatisfied with the environment. Eh! Thea exclaimed softly. She wanted to manifest the muscular version of Diablo, but it seemed that because Thea was a woman, the slender female version of Diablo appeared instead. However, using fear to manifest the Dreadlord was a perfect match. She felt as if she could command her own arm. The two complemented each other, and Sia even felt that her understanding of fear had deepened again. This was incredible. Her understanding of fear was already unparalleled, and now it seemed to have gone further. How could she not be surprised? Chapter 323. Thea flew into the demon god's body. The two of them blended together as if they had always been one. She didn't need to be so tall to deal with these two guys. She compressed all her energy and used it to materialize the details. Every line and every muscle on the demon god's body was vivid and lifelike. The demon god's 10-meter-tall body took a step forward. The huge force caused the ground within a mile to tremble. Roar! The demon god seemed to be venting its satisfaction. It spread its arms and roared at the sky. Heat waves spread in all directions. The temperature in the square rose rapidly. The moisture in the air evaporated rapidly. Their noses twitched, and they could smell a large amount of burnt sulfur. Many unconscious citizens' hair curled up. What is this? The charm which only felt that the demon god was powerful. The demon god of vengeance, Chatter Santana, had a much deeper feeling. This was a high-level demon from hell. As for how powerful it was, it could be judged from the trembling demon in its body. You ungrateful thing! Who gave you the courage to play with fire in front of me? I'll let you see the real fire of hell. Thea's voice came out of the demon god's mouth. The originally beautiful and crisp voice sounded like it had been sawed by a saw. Every word was accompanied by a special noise. Fire tornado! The ferocious demon god crossed its arms and gathered a large amount of emotional energy. Thea, whose magic power had increased greatly, injected a large amount of fire and wind magic power into it. Injecting her magic power into the emotional energy was like throwing a match into a pot of oil. The two different magic powers caused the energy to become raging and uncontrollable instantly. The demon god opened its mouth and revealed a terrifying smile. It held the energy ball with one hand and threw it at the charm witch who couldn't move. As if to intimidate them, Thea didn't throw it very quickly.
After the energy ball came into contact with the debris, it quickly expanded thousands of times and started to spin at high speed. The debris in the square was sucked into the center of the vortex, which increased the speed of the fire tornado's formation. In less than 3 seconds, a fiery red tornado that was 100 meters tall and more than 10 meters in diameter had already formed. As the number of objects increased, the centrifugal force increased. The tornado's diameter grew from 20 meters to 30 meters, as if there was no end to it, and it rushed towards the two of them. Stop her! Attack her! The charming witch was starting to lose her sense of propriety.
She had mixed up the meaning of her words. Perhaps she didn't know what to do.
The former gangster, Chatter Santana, was much calmer than her.
He secretly despised the African antique.
He suppressed the demon in his body that was trying to escape. At the same time, his eyes and mouth were burning. He shouted, and a 3-meter-tall flaming demon appeared. The demon clenched its fists and stood in front of the charm which, as if it wanted to take on the fire tornado with its own strength.
Idiot! Thea snorted at his actions.
She could tell that this guy had never studied the demon transformation at all just by looking at the energy that was leaking out of him.
He wanted to rely on the body of a mortal to carry the power of hell? What a dream!
If it was that simple, why did the ancient sorcerers study magic? They could just catch a demon and stuff it into their bodies. Not only could this guy not control the energy that was leaking out of his body, but he also wanted to use the demon transformation to resist the fire tornado.
Thea didn't know what to say. Even Thea, the caster, couldn't control the fire tornado now, let alone him. The demon's spells had always been like this. They never cared about the consequences, and only used as much power as they could.
As for the destruction of the environment and other problems, it was not in their dictionary at all. The ignorant and fearless Chatter Santana was now standing bravely in front of the fiery red tornado that was hundreds of meters tall, and had a diameter that he couldn't see the end of.
At this moment, he suddenly realized a problem. His cultural knowledge had never taught him how to withstand a tornado. It was too late to go back and ask the teachers at school now. He could only stand firmly on the ground and muster up all the mana in his body to resist the tornado. Thea, who had conjured Diablo, saw this scene through the eyes of the demon god and almost laughed out loud. This guy was holding up the sky with both hands. No matter how she looked at it, it was stupid. Then, while she was gloating, Chatter Santana was instantly sucked into the tornado. Not only did he not stop the tornado, but his mana also increased the total energy of the tornado to a certain extent. Her external help was of no help at all. The enchantress was faced with a dilemma of two choices: to give up on the civilians on the ground or to resist the tornado head-on. She made the decision quickly. She chose to resist the tornado head-on. She used all the mana in her body to summon a black tornado. However, it turned in the opposite direction of Thea's tornado in an attempt to neutralize part of the wind speed. Then, she set up 3 10-meter-tall and 5-meter-thick earthen walls in front of the tornado. Humph, look down on me. Let me show you something else. Thea did not know why the demon god did not teleport away. Instead, he chose to resist the tornado head-on. This was very illogical. Thea did not know whether this spell could only be used once, or she did not want to give up the blood essence that she had obtained. But she knew that if the demon god did not run away, she could use a more powerful spell. The conjured demon god took a deep breath and absorbed all the energy and emotions in the surrounding air. Countless energy gathered in his mouth. This time, Thea did not hesitate and added her light, dark, fire, and wind attributes into the spell. The demon god first absorbed the energy and leaned back.
Then, he suddenly lunged forward and shot out the energy gathered in his mouth in a beam.
Red and blue alternately flashed, and a thick lightning bolt more than 2 meters in diameter shot out. This time, the attack was so fast that the enchantress was caught off guard. The lightning breath was released later but arrived first. It surpassed the fire tornado and directly hit the earthen walls erected by the enchantress. This was a guided spell, not a hammer. Thea continued to control the conjured demon god to add new energy to the lightning breath. The lightning beam hit the earthen walls of the enchantress, and the first layer of the wall was instantly penetrated. The enchantress was shocked. She hurriedly poured her mana into the second wall, trying to stabilize the defensive line. However, Thea's total mana was stronger than her, and she also had the demon god to control it. One was a point of damage, and the other was an area of effect defense. There was no need to say which was better. The second wall only lasted for less than 10 seconds before it was penetrated again. The enchantress did not have time to be surprised, because Thea suddenly attacked again, trying to take her down in one blow. I'll hold her off. You set up the defense. The one who roared was Chatter Santana, who had been swept up into the sky. The enchantress' reverse tornado had some effect. At least, the suction force had weakened a lot. Chatter finally broke free with great effort. As a grasshopper on a rope, he could see that the enchantress could not block it. He could only brace himself to take on Thea's lightning breath. Chapter 324. Facing the red and blue lightning beam from the demon god, Chatter didn't know if he could withstand it. However, he had a strength, or rather, a weakness, and that was his stubbornness. As long as he thought he was right, he would do anything regardless of anyone. He was like this when he was captured by the Sky's Eye Society, and now he was going to block Thea's lightning beam. The loss of demonic power every minute and every second had already made him feel exhausted. He knew that he only had the strength for this one attack. He clenched his fists, bent his knees, and mobilized all the hellfire in his body to rush towards the lightning beam. Bang! There was a loud noise. It was a bit of an exaggeration to say that Chatter blocked the lightning beam for more than a second. His hellfire only slowed down the speed of the lightning beam slightly. After that, it was his body that had to face the lightning breath directly. His palm and wrist were directly vaporized by the huge energy beam. Perhaps the demon in his body sensed the danger and controlled his body to move slightly to the side, saving his life. However, his right arm and shoulder were all blown away, leaving nothing behind. Chatter Santana didn't say a word and directly fainted. The demon in his body was also seriously injured and had to go into hibernation. Fortunately, his brave resistance did consume a lot of the lightning beam's energy, and at the same time, bought time for the charm witch to regroup. This time, she didn't block it directly. Instead, she opened a huge portal in the path of the lightning beam. A huge amount of lightning energy poured in. The charm witch gritted her teeth to maintain the portal so that it wouldn't explode. After a full 5 seconds, the entire lightning beam was transferred away. As for where it was transferred to, she didn't have the time to think about it. The portal can be used like this. Thea had just started on the path of spatial teleportation. Seeing this scene, she couldn't help but admire it. The demon's attack didn't matter. It could be released, but it couldn't be retracted. The lightning breath just now, she could only run, but she couldn't take it head-on. This attack consumed a lot of energy from the demon god. Its original height of 10 meters shrank by half, and it was now only 5 meters. Thea had consumed emotional energy, but she didn't consume much energy. The seductive witch was not in such a good state. She had been maintaining the array beneath her and had been forced to activate the teleportation gate with all her strength. The backlash from the array and the intense consumption of magic power had greatly aggravated the hidden injuries in her body. After all, the original owner of this body, Dr. Jean Munn, did not have a magical constitution. Forcefully using magic like this would cause great damage to the original body. He originally looked like a white man in his 30s, but now he looked like he had aged 20 years. His face was full of wrinkles and his hair was dry and yellow. This was the result of the rejection between the magic power and his body. Suppress her. Thea ordered the materialized demon god in her mind. She pulled out her demon sword and flew to the unconscious Chatter. He stabbed the sword down, but there was no reaction. He stabbed the sword again, but there was still no reaction. Could it be that this sword was ineffective against demons? Thea couldn't help but think this way. These guys who forged the demon swords were quite loyal. Didn't demons fight demons? Thea didn't believe it and stabbed the unconscious Chatter Santana twice more. Only when the unconscious Chatter Santana began to vomit blood did she finally confirm that this sword was ineffective against demons. This also proved why the resourceful ninja master didn't make any progress after holding this sword for hundreds of years. It was because the sword was ineffective against demons, but the ninja master could only come into contact with demons. Thea stopped being depressed. This guy on the ground couldn't do it, but the seductive witch in the distance could, right? She didn't enter the materialized body and diverted part of her mind to control it. She wanted to fight 2 against 1 and kill her quickly. Holding the 1.5-meter-long sword in one hand, Thea blessed herself with wind walk. She was as fast as lightning and closed the distance of less than 100 meters in an instant. She held the sword with both hands and slashed at the seductive witch's neck. The seductive witch kept summoning shadow creatures in an attempt to stop the materialized demon god. Some of them were shadow leopards and shadow snakes that Thea could summon herself. There were also many strange creatures that were obviously not from the material world. With a large number of summoned creatures, the seductive witch was able to stall the materialized demon god who had lost half of its strength and had lost Thea's core control. However, facing Thea who was rushing at her, the seductive witch didn't dare to be careless. She summoned 2 long swords from the void and blocked the seductive witch's magic sword. Ever since the battle with the ninja master, Thea had also experienced the power of dual wielding. She had a very aggressive personality and any combination of sword and shield didn't suit her. She changed to holding the sword with one hand and took out the frost gun from the space ring with her left hand. She sprayed it at the seductive witch. Damn! The seductive witch was too familiar with this gun. It could be said that without this gun, she could still hide in Joan Munn's body for a few years. She wouldn't have jumped out in such a hurry like now. She hated this gun, but hatred aside, she couldn't just shout and use magic power to kill the enemy. That was the privilege of the protagonist. She didn't have that ability. In the face of the surging cold air, she could use magic power to resist it for a while. But what about after that? After fusing with Joan Munn's soul, she also understood that this was a technological society. Joan Munn was an archaeologist. She had never seen a frost gun, but she still knew that this weapon consumed the energy of firearms. Using her own magic power to consume the energy of the opponent's technological weapon was a stupid thing to do. The fire tornado in the distance was slowed down by her magic. It wasn't as fast as before, but it was still slowly approaching. The seductive witch didn't have time to think about it. She had no choice but to cut off the connection between herself and the bloodline absorption circle and directly teleported to avoid the cold air. Thea pursued the seductive witch.
With the frost gun in her left hand and the magic sword in her right hand, she slashed fiercely at the seductive witch.
When she was close, she would slash with her sword. When she was far away, she would hit with her gun. Thea had the upper hand. But she wasn't happy. Instead, she was a little depressed. The magic sword could absorb the seductive witch's magic power. The first few slashes really scared the seductive witch. Her skills were at the level of a kindergarten compared to Thea. She could hit her twice in 3 moves. When the sword slashed her body, her HP and magic power would drop. No one could withstand it. But after Thea absorbed a little, she artificially released the magic power. This was because the magic power was not only different from her own magic power, but also had different characteristics. Although they were both of the dark attribute, there were too many impurities and it had a death aura. Although in order to obtain power, Thea was almost unrestrained, this kind of energy was too corrosive. If she absorbed too much of it, she would be like the seductive witch in the beginning. Her unkempt hair and dirty face were a vivid portrayal. She could play the role of a necromancer without makeup. Anyone who looked at her appearance would know that she was a villain. Thea didn't have to absorb this energy. If she didn't, she would die. Without thinking much, she directly expelled the energy from her body. Regretfully, she put away the magic sword and replaced it with the Godslayer. Chapter 325. She thought it would be a sumptuous meal, but it turned out to be poisoned. There was no need to mention how frustrated Sia was. She poured fire magic into the Godslayer and slashed at the charm witch. The enchanted witch did not know that she was being despised. She was surprised to see Thea put away her magic sword, but when she saw Thea pull out a fiery red long sword, she had no time to think. The two of them exchanged another 7 or 8 blows. The charm witch's martial arts were mediocre, but her teleportation truly lived up to its name. She no longer had to rely on her scattered magic power to teleport. Now that she had regained her body, she could teleport anywhere she saw with almost zero consumption of magic power. Clang! There was a loud noise. The demon god released a large ring of fire around himself and destroyed all the shadow creatures in one blow. He strode over to help the enchanted witch. The enchanted witch was no match for Thea, let alone this demon made of unknown materials. She hurriedly dodged Thea's sword, but she was met with the demon god's tail full of bone spikes. Slap! There was a crisp sound, and the huge force slapped her face out of shape. She was in mid-air, and her mind went blank. Thea took advantage of this rare opportunity to stab her in the back and out the front. The enchanted witch teleported 3 times in a row, dodging Thea's follow-up attack. She was half kneeling on the ground, her hands supporting her body as she vomited mouthfuls of black blood. She was not Ares, a parallax demon, who could use energy to heal her damaged body. She had never suffered such a serious injury in the past few hundred years. The fire magic attached to the Godslayer was also constantly eroding her body, destroying the magic circulation in her body. She covered her wound and stared at Thea with her green eyes. Just when Thea thought she was preparing for a big move, she saw the enchanted witch disappear in front of her like smoke. Teleportation again? Thea soon found that the enchanted witch did not appear around her. She had run away. She opened the Eye of Horus and followed the direction where the opponent's magic had disappeared. Soon, She found the figure of the enchantress 2 kilometers away. The injury from the previous sword strike was far more serious than she had imagined. The broken magic cycle had caused her to be unable to teleport. The enchantress was also aware of this problem. Although she did not have a long-range vision like the Eye of Horus, she was extremely sensitive to magic power.
She could sense that Thea was searching for her. Looking at the battlefield around her, she saw that the Archer of Death and Rick Flegg were exchanging fire not far from her.
Rick, who originally had 7 or 8 subordinates, was in great pain from the Archer of Death. Although they were also elite soldiers, the Archer of Death's marksmanship was far better than theirs.
In less than 10 minutes of exchanging fire, 4 of his subordinates had already been killed.
The remaining few, including Rick Flegg, were all struggling to hold on.
The enchantress, who had entered the battlefield, quickly judged the situation and was about to teleport to kill the Archer of Death.
After that, she could rely on these soldiers to slightly delay Thea's pursuit. After years of mercenary life, the Archer of Death had developed an amazing intuition.
Although he did not see any danger, he still rolled forward in advance and dodged the enchantress who had teleported to his side.
Realizing that he had been ambushed, he did not even look at who the attacker was. He raised his hands and fired wildly with the silenced pistol on his wrist at the target. The enchantress had finally found some pleasure in torturing noobs. Her heart was indescribably happy. Like a ghost, she flashed left and right around the Archer of Death. In less than 3 seconds, the Archer of Death had been hit twice, and the remaining one was blocked by his wrist guard.
You must be very proud of bullying people who don't have magic.
Thea finally caught up. Her spatial magic was only at the beginning. She did not care about teleporting others, but she felt that teleporting herself was too dangerous. When they were in the square, Thea saw that the fire tornado was getting closer and closer. Thousands of people were still unconscious in the square. She raised her hand and reversed the direction of the fire tornado, changing the direction of the fire tornado. This spell was very powerful and was very useful against enemies in a large area. However, it was not very effective against single enemies. She would have to use it carefully next time. Thea cancelled the spell and quickly caught up with the Archer of Death. Seeing that the enchantress's knife was only a few centimeters away from the Archer of Death's neck, she raised her hand and slapped it with a magician's hand. Now that her mana was several times stronger than before, this kind of low-level spell could be cast instantly. The invisible giant hand slammed into the Archer of Death's stomach and sent him flying 5 or 6 meters back.
Thank you.
Can you use more force? The Archer of Death clutched his stomach and staggered to get up. He gritted his teeth and shouted at Thea. This was different from the time when she dealt with the katana at the Ministry of Defense. At that time, Thea had held back. This time, she used it on the Archer of Death, which almost broke his intestines.
You're welcome.
Thea took advantage of the situation and slashed down with her sword. The enchantress was about to teleport away, but Thea had already targeted her.
She did not stop and shot the frost gun at her as if it was free.
The enchantress was only halfway through her teleportation when her left hand was frozen. Thea's angle of attack was very tricky. The huge icicle connected her hand to the ground. The enchantress struggled twice but could not break free. Seeing that Thea's frost gun began to hum again, the enchantress knew that there was a problem before the gun could be used. However, this gap was very short, leaving her only a little more than a second to think. She made a prompt decision.
She raised the long sword in her right hand and slashed at her left arm.
Her left arm was cut off from the elbow. Fortunately, the blood in her veins was almost frozen, and the wound was very cold. Other than losing an arm, the damage was not great. The enchantress did not dare to look back. She chose to teleport. Damn, that's a lot of determination. Thea was a little impressed. The frost gun's cooldown was only 1 second. It was not easy to make such a decision in such a short time. After all, any damage to her body would be permanent. However, the enemy had escaped under her nose. She had to give chase. Just as she was about to fly away, Rick Flegg tied 4 or 5 grenades together and threw them at her like a madman. He hurriedly conjured a yellow protective shield and withstood the violent explosion.
You're courting death.
Thea looked straight at Rick Flegg. This person had betrayed his country for his lover, and now he did not even care about his life? There weren't many people who weren't afraid of her intimidating gaze. Rick Flegg was also human, so he was naturally afraid.
However, it was unknown if it was because his heart was filled with the feelings he had imagined, But his strong love overcame a portion of his fear, and the rest was withstood by his willpower.
Rick Flag was extremely silent.
He raised the M4A1 in his hand and fired at Thea with all his might. Then, he saw the person in yellow raise a finger, and a golden ray of light came closer and closer before his eyes.
The yellow light penetrated his skin and skull like a sharp arrow. He did not know anything after that. After killing Rick Flag in an instant, Thea raised her hand to help him finish off the remaining 2 soldiers who were still firing. She looked around and searched for the Enchantress location.
She directly rose into the air and chased after her, leaving the Archer of Death clutching his stomach on the ground.
Chapter 326. Death Archer looked at Rick Flag, who was lying on the ground with his eyes wide open, and sighed. This man had fought with him for a long time. Although his marksmanship was not as good as his mind was very flexible. He fought bravely despite being at a disadvantage. From a mercenary's point of view, he was a worthy opponent. But his excellent marksmanship, battle awareness, and flexible mind did not help him resist the enemy. In the face of the ridiculously strong man in yellow, the other party just moved his finger and turned him into a corpse. He did not even have the chance to use the skills that he had painstakingly trained. He died in a clean way. Sighing, he felt sorry for the opponent he respected, but Death Archer had seen countless people die in front of him in his life. He would not be swayed by such a small matter. He took out his phone and took a few photos to prove that he was the one who killed this person, so that he could go back and collect the money. He had the same thoughts as Death Nell, especially after seeing Thea's tyrannical strength. He was even more certain that he was just a bystander. Now that he had a battle record, he could go back and collect the money. Just as he was about to leave, he inadvertently saw the left arm that the charm witch had cut off. The frost gun was very efficient. The broken arm in the ice was still emitting wisps of black gas, which were especially obvious in the transparent ice. Take it away. He had not decided whether to keep it as a trophy or hand it over to the Heaven's Eye Society, but it was not wrong to take it back. Not to mention how Death Archer took the broken arm out of the ice, Thea was desperately blocked by Rick Flag, so this time it took her longer to catch up. Unfortunately, Rick Flag's sacrifice did not have much meaning. The charm witch's strength was greatly reduced, and she could no longer maintain a high frequency of spatial teleportation. The distance she teleported was getting shorter and shorter, and the interval between teleportations was getting longer and longer. She consumed a lot of her physical strength and magic power. She knew that Thea was chasing after her, but she had to stop and rest every time she teleported. Damn it! The charming witch rested for less than 10 seconds before Thea caught up with her. The two of them fought and stopped. Thea was basically in perfect condition, but the other party was less than 30% of her peak condition. The more she witnessed it, the more secrets of the charm witch's teleportation were exposed. In Thea's eyes, although her spells were more inclined towards witchcraft and Thea's were magic, they were different paths to the same goal. She believed that after this battle, Thea's spatial magic would reach a new level. Who told you to run? Run. Thea was no longer fighting her in close combat. Her teleportation ability was truly unpredictable. Fighting her in close combat was a waste of time. The Frost Spear's firing speed was not fast enough. The best weapon to deal with her was a divine longbow paired with light elemental magic arrows. Flying 20 meters above the ground, Thea drew her bow and shot an arrow as soon as she showed her head. At this moment, Thea was reminded of the time when she rode a skateboard across Gotham. Boom! Clang! The sound came one after another. The path they took seemed to have been bombed, and the ground was full of craters. Presumably, the city's reconstruction in the future would be another business for the Quinn Group. Damn rat, you're dead! Thea was very happy with her shooting. Suddenly, she realized a problem. Her opponent was now a woman who had done many evil things. It was completely in line with the teachings of the goddess of the hunt and the requirements of the arrow of vengeance. Unlike the last time when she was beaten up by Ares, she had to accumulate divine power to take revenge. This time, it was a one-sided beating. It was more likely that the charm witch would take revenge on her. The ability to accumulate divine power could not be used. It was purely to fulfill the teachings of the goddess of the hunt and take revenge on the evil woman who lost her virginity. Hee hee. Thea took out the only 2 crimson arrows in her quiver. This arrow was half the length of an ordinary arrow and required the bow to be fully drawn. As long as the target was locked on, it would automatically track and hit the target.
Ares was able to split half of his divine power to create a clone and deceive the divine arrow. You, an African native, can't do that, right? When the bowstring was fully drawn, Thea used the Eye of Horus to lock onto the charm which was about to escape the city. She pointed the bow at the sky and silently recited the goddess' prayer. The face of the charm which appeared in her mind. It's her, she must die. As this thought came to her mind, the arrow of vengeance seemed to sense her strong desire to fight. The originally ordinary arrow shaft was surrounded by a cloud of red mist, and countless profound runes appeared on the arrowhead. Thea just glanced at it and stopped looking. This knowledge was not something she could grasp at the moment. This was the same as the arrow and Diana's lasso of truth. It was a creation of laws above divine power and could not be replicated. Dang! Thea roared and released the bowstring with her right hand. The crimson arrow drew a beautiful arc and shot into the distance. The air, the earth, and the river seemed to resonate with the word, die. All intelligent creatures, including birds, beasts, and insects, received the warning in their hearts. The weak ones crawled on the ground, while the strong ones looked around nervously. The entire city fell into a temporary silence under the power of the arrow. What the hell? As the strongest intelligent creature in the city, other than Thea, the charm which was more sensitive to the arrow because the arrow was aimed at her. The silent chill and pure murderous intent mixed together and rushed in the direction of the charm which. It was clearly a cold and murderous intent, but she did not feel evil here. There was only a simple meaning. I want to kill you, so you must die. The charm which no longer cared about her injuries. She used her life to teleport several times in a row, trying to avoid the arrow. However, the arrow could also teleport. The distance between the two was rapidly shrinking. The charm which only felt that she had never been in such a dangerous situation in hundreds of years. This killing intent was unrestrained. It only wanted the target to die, no matter where the target ran to. I won't die. I still have a way. The charm which spat out an ugly scarecrow from her mouth. The scarecrow was black and looked exactly the same as when Thea first met her. The charm which reached out and dug out one of her eyes, slapped it into the scarecrow's body, and spat a few mouthfuls of black blood on it. She opened a long-distance portal and threw the scarecrow into it. After that, she stared at the arrow nervously. However, she was disappointed. Ares's divine power could deceive the arrow of vengeance, but the level of her witchcraft was much lower. Dolls could usually avoid some fatal attacks, but today, she was not facing magic or divine power, but the power of rules of a higher level. Only the natural order could go against the natural order. The crimson arrow did not know mercy or sympathy. It was the judge and the ultimate executor. Bang! All the intelligent creatures heard the sound of a hammer smashing glass. The enchantress used her body to illustrate the teachings of the goddess of the hunt. The arrow pierced through her chest, but there was no blood or organs in the wound. It was as if the wound was made of air. The charm which blankly covered her wound, but she touched nothing. Her body was rapidly dissipating. Chapter 327. My body. The charming witch wanted to say something, but her body dissipated too quickly. In the blink of an eye, half of her body seemed to have been erased out of thin air. Her mouth made a whimpering sound. She no longer had any vocal organs. She knew that resistance was meaningless, but her life instinct still made her gather the remaining magic to resist this kind of destruction on the level of the rules. But all of this was futile. Before the ink-black magic touched the nothingness, the charming witch felt her sense of touch, hearing and vision being rapidly stripped away. The cold killing intent had already reached her head. Her soul was unwilling to die just like that. She desperately sent out waves of soul fluctuations, but in the face of the powerful rules, everything was so powerless. When she made up her mind to self-destruct her mana, at least to leave something in this world that could prove that she had been here, her dark elemental mana began to flip and boil, but it was already too late. The power of the natural order swept across, and whatever mana or soul, everything disappeared in the face of the natural order. The earth-shattering explosion did not happen, and the vicious curse before death did not shout out. The charming witch was killed by the arrow of vengeance. Huff. Thea did not feel good shooting this arrow. Revenge required a price, and it also required the strength to match it. It was impossible for a child of a few years old to stab Hera to death with the arrow of vengeance. Artemis was not that powerful. Artifacts were weapons used by gods, and the lowered standard also meant that there was a price to pay for using them. If it were not for the recent increase in her magic power, This arrow would have absorbed her life force. The instant withdrawal of 70% of her magic power, even if her body had been transformed by divine power, was a little difficult to bear. She rested for a while on the spot before she could catch her breath. She flew to the place where the charming witch died and searched the place. This arrow of vengeance was really powerful. There was not even a trace of the witch left. She died so cleanly that there was no trace of her existence. After shooting the arrow of vengeance, Thea did not continue to maintain the Eye of Horus due to the intense magic consumption. She did not see the scene of the charm witch releasing the doll. She rested for a while until she recovered half of her combat power, and then rushed to the other two battlefields. Death Knell and Captain Boomerang's battle was slightly closer to each other. By the time Thea arrived, the battle had already ended. Death Knell's strength was already higher than Captain Boomerang's, and with Captain Boomerang's mind control, he couldn't unleash his full strength. He was constantly being suppressed. Just as Death Knell's longsword was about to cut his neck, the charming witch died, and Captain Boomerang's mind control was released. In the face of Death Knell's fatal blow, the Australian unleashed all of his potential at the critical moment, throwing out his last boomerang before he died. Slade was shocked, but he was helpless as the distance between the two was too close. Even though he was stronger than his opponent, it was useless. He could only tilt his head slightly to avoid the boomerang. The boomerang cut a wound of more than 10 centimeters from his cheekbone to his eye and forehead. The wound was so deep that the bone could be seen, and his right eye was blinded. However, Death Knell was also a ruthless person. Even though he was seriously injured, the long sword in his hand did not stop, and he cut off Captain Boomerang's neck. This Australian, who was still somewhat famous in the original timeline, died under Death Knell's sword before he became famous. When Thea arrived, she saw this scene. In the blink of an eye, one was dead and one was injured. Captain Boomerang had lost his life. Death Knell did not know about the mind control. He only felt that he had been suppressing his opponent. However, due to his carelessness, his opponent counterattacked before he died, blinding him in one eye. This made him extremely angry. "I'll help you stabilize your injuries first," Thea said as a white light flashed between her fingers, and the bleeding from Slade's wound slowed down significantly. "You rest first. I'll go to the other battlefield." Of course, Thea could heal him. It was just a matter of regrowing a broken limb. However, this was not the right place, nor was the right time. If the other party was not loyal, there was no need for her to waste her magic power. Slade did not utter a word. He sat on Captain Boomerang's corpse and lowered his head in deep thought. As for what he was thinking, no one knew. The clown woman and the katana fought Killer Crocodile together. The battle situation was not out of Thea's expectations. The two women's strength was not bad. Taking advantage of the charm witch's death, the mind control disappeared, and Killer Crocodile was stunned. The two women attacked fiercely. Thea rushed to the battlefield and saw the katana piercing Killer Crocodile's upper jaw and out of his lower jaw, firmly nailing his mouth to the ground. Then, taking advantage of his violent struggle, the clown woman raised her baseball bat and smashed Killer Crocodile's head. The crazy clown woman only stopped attacking when the specially made baseball bat broke. Killer Crocodile's breathing was weak and he fell into a severe coma. Just as Katana was about to give him another fatal blow, Amanda finally arrived. "Stop." As her direct subordinate, Katana was very obedient. She withdrew her katana upon hearing her command, and Killer Crocodile's life was saved. Have the two enemies been dealt with? Thea slowly landed on the ground. Amanda immediately asked. As soon as Thea said no, she would immediately run. Fortunately, Thea did not disappoint her. They've been dealt with. The one with fire is most likely still breathing. As for the charm witch, she has been completely destroyed. Amanda was very happy that the matter had been resolved perfectly. She immediately ordered her subordinates to clean up the battlefield. Using the excuse of asking about the battle situation, she stopped Thea, a powerful fighter, from leaving. The bodies of the targets were carried out. Captain Boomerang and Rick Flegg's bodies were cold. Amanda sighed at Rick Flegg. She was not sad about his death. She felt sorry for the time she had wasted on Rick Flegg. In order to train a qualified subordinate, she had put in a lot of effort. Now that years of effort had turned into a cold corpse, she still felt sad for a second. What's this? A second later, she was attracted by the thing wrapped in Death Shooter's clothes. Their main force had entered too quickly.
Death Shooter had just taken his arm out of the ice. There was no way he could hide it, so he had no choice but to hand it over. That witch's arm. It just seems a little dry. I think it's loss of water?
Death Shooter held the thing that looked like a hand bone wrapped in a layer of human skin and explained to Amanda.
Amanda did not listen to his explanation. She automatically looked at Thea, the occult expert. Thea used her mental power to feel for a bit.
There was still a trace of energy left in the arm, but because the charm witch's soul had been destroyed, the magic on the arm dissipated very quickly.
This is the charm witch's arm. Since her soul has been destroyed, this arm is useless. Take it back and destroy it, Thea said casually. Amanda thought of something and nodded. She ordered her subordinates to take out a box and put the arm inside.